Sword of Coming Chapter 925. Qing Tong, who was dragging his sleeves on the ground, was as if he was instantly shattered by a punch, and his body suddenly split into two. Qing Tong was no longer the extremely long sleeves and ethereal posture. A xianxia body appeared on the spot. He was an old man with a burly stature, his arms and muscles knotted, and his hair and beards were like snow, standing barefoot. The old man showed a slightly surprised face, his feet were on the smooth ground like a mirror, and he withdrew straight for several feet before stopping his figure and shaking his wrists. Only this subtle movement, which is not unusual, is like a dragon shaking its scales, a fist like a river flowing turbulently, and it shows a golden atmosphere visible to the naked eye. This old martial artist, who claims to be half a god, stands in the midst of incense like an immortal god. This Qing Tong, who has tempered his physical toughness to the extreme, seems quite surprised at the moment. A pure martial artist who is only a level of restraint and vigor, especially a 10-level martial artist who has fallen from the first level of return, is so big. Strength? Qing Tong's eyes were playful, and when he glanced into the distance, the night travel sword was still hovering in place. Obviously it was a very pure questioning. That's right. Is it possible that a sword cultivator who is not in the Yupu realm needs to ask a sword cultivator in the ascended realm? It's not self-inflicted. Standing in a bright red robe where Qing Tong stood before, his sleeves fluttered, hunting, like the wind hitting his sleeves. Compared with Qing Tong's flowing fist and aggressive momentum, Qin Pinggan's fist is extremely restrained. Qing Tong didn't rush to do it anyway. He didn't need to find him by himself. This guy, who is neither a man nor a ghost, would come to the door obediently by himself. To put it bluntly, the realm gap between the two sides is there. Qing Tong can stand still and take dozens of punches. When that time comes, it only needs to return a punch and it's over. Since the young man in front of him had no face, naturally he couldn't talk about the look and face. Qing Tong saw the other side bowed slightly. Here comes. Qing Tong squinted a pair of eyes, and slightly accelerated the speed of a mouthful of pure innocent energy in his body. After the mountains and rivers in the small world of the human body, there were bursts of anomalies, the thunder and lightning in the sky intertwined, and the mountains and rivers trembled. This is still Qing Tong's failure to truly rank among the gods, but it has a rudimentary form. To be precise, it's just an empty shell. Once Takeo is truly at the top of the legendary end, the flesh is a pantheon, and Takeo's pure innocence is the incense divine way that connects the heavens and the earth and leads to the temple. I am God. Qing Tong relied on the accumulation of water-milling efforts over the years, bit by bit, after a long time of fighting and physique, still has not laid the foundation, but can only use a clever shortcut to create an aerial loft. The opponent's close route is an arc trajectory, swiftly moving, and the speed is so fast, it is simply a white horse crossing talisman. The afterimage dragged out is like a fire dragon. Qing Tong still stood on the spot, just turned a little sideways without evasive, stretched out a palm to resist the opponent's punch. Under the collision of fists and palms, the world resembled a huge sound of Hongzhong and Daliu, and behind Qing Tong's vast Taishu realm, suddenly there was an agitated and open ripples of fists as large as a lake. Qing Tong grabbed the opponent's fist, suddenly lifted it up and kicked it out. But Qing Tong had to change his mind. The hand that was always on the back, lightning went around in front of him, raised his hand to cover his face. Then he was kicked in the palm of his hand, and the back of his hand hit the front door heavily, and Qing Tong's figure fell back in an instant again. Qing Tong wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, and there were faint tearing noises in the snow-white robe on her body. Standing again in the bright red robe in the original position of Qing Tong, one arm drooped straight, showing a penetrating twisting style. The shoulders moved slightly, the joints made a series of movements, and the whole arm quickly rotated, instantly returning to its original shape. The snow-white old man pulled the corner of his mouth and hooked his fingers. Come again. The figures of the two sides suddenly appeared and disappeared suddenly, and the two fisted together. There were countless afterimages, one bright red and the other snow-white, radiant, like 100 flowers. Qing Tong has deliberately never really fought back, just parrying. I took this opportunity to take a good look at how many kilograms a young hidden official who is about to be touted to the sky today is. Qing Tong looked calm, head tilted back, avoiding a swept whip leg, and his body leaned back slightly, but suddenly raised his arm, palm like a knife, and slashed away. The opponent's figure disappeared in a flash. Qing Tong put away his palm, moved one step horizontally, and instantly stretched out a distance of more than 100 meters, leaned one shoulder, and slammed the bright red robe away fiercely. Qin Pinggan fell to the ground in the distance. Qing Tong sneered. After all, it was just a body of flesh and blood. Although there is not the slightest decadence and it is far from the end of the strong crossbow, if Qin Pingan only has this speed and strength, then it is really difficult under the prestige. Of course, this kid must still have some killer tricks at the bottom of the box, and he hasn't displayed it for the time being. Qing Tong smiled and asked, "Do you want me to press down and feed the fist? Or is this guy satiated and braced, testing his martial arts level, physical strength and skill?" Qin Pingan still did not speak. Qing Tong thought for a while and began to take the initiative to move for the first time, a horizontal movement that was as fast as a thunder, and he left the place 10 miles in an instant. Unexpectedly, the bright red dress followed. Qing Tong's snack was startled, smiled slightly, twisted his ankles, and appeared again 10 miles away in an instant. Unexpectedly, the other party was still following and Qing Tong rose up from the ground. A white rainbow swiftly lifted into the air, and his figure was nearly 30% faster. As a result, Qin Pingan still kept up, handed out a punch and hit Qing Tong's eyebrows. He was replaced by a Jade Pure Realm practitioner or a boundless wufu. With this seemingly understatement, his head blossomed and he became a headless corpse on the spot. Qing Tong only turned his head slightly, and then slapped his opponent's forehead with a slap again. With a sudden force, with a bang, a bright red robe leaned toward the ground, and a huge depression was smashed above the mirror. It's just that when the opponent was knocked down, it was not completely useless. Qing Tong was a little annoyed and put his fingers together, pressed one side of his cheek and wiped off the blood. In fact, it's not an injury, it's just a bit embarrassing. Qing Tong said strange things. The other party obviously didn't force a sigh of pure true energy, but was able to turn back at a faster speed and handed a punch to himself. Qing Tong tried to see the principle of this fist clearly, squinted his eyes, and for the first time showed a solemn expression, and began to carefully check the subtle flow of the fist, such as the trembling of the muscles and bones of the arm when Qin Pingan handed the fist. The qi and blood travels, the expansion of the meridians, the ups and downs of these mountains, and the rushing direction of the mountains and rivers fall in the eyes of the great master of martial arts. This kind of boxing theory and boxing technique hidden deep in the human body is the true foundation of pure martial arts. After receiving 5 or 6 punches, Qing Tong still couldn't see the way of his fist clearly, but vaguely felt that Qin Pingan's punch was profound and indescribable. All in one go. Because this punch is by no means a simple repetition of the same move. Just like the description and resemblance, the fundamentals are 2 characters, and there are always some subtle differences. The difference is 1,000 miles away. What's more weird is that the angle of Qin Pingan's punches and the posture are obviously different. But the flow of that pure innocence is like a river rushing to the sea, and the depth, width of the riverbed are the same. Responding to changes with the unchanging, the opposite is true, ever-changing, consistent. Just like this punch, the entrance to the sea where the destination is located is the same. Even Qin Pingan, who delivered this fist, had the same spirit of Qin Pingan, the same as the previous one, without the slightest deviation. This made Qing Tong not only surprised and shocked, but also a big surprise. Can boxing be practiced like this? Can you pass fists like this? After only a few dozen punches, Qing Tong realized that something was wrong. How did he feel that there was no end to this punch? Is Qin Pingan able to keep punching as long as he can hold it? The opponent not only superimposed his fists, but his figure in a bright red robe was getting faster and faster, tossing and turning, no longer losing to the shuddering mountains and rivers of an immortal. The fist did not fail, and Qing Tong had already blasted dozens of winter thunders. After the 20th punch, Qing Tong had to grit his teeth and retreat in one step. For the first time he opened a serious old boxing frame, but it was very different from the current pile frame, with his fingers close together like a sword. Ju, the other hand, the 5 fingers pinched the 5 thunder Ju. Together with this fist, among the 7 orifices of the same green face, each of them shines with a bright light, like the rays of the Beidou and Qiao. When hushing, it is like a thunder in the wild, and the fist is shot out in no time. Exchange punches with Qin Pingan. But still unable to interrupt the opponent's continuous punches, Qing Tong took another 5 punches one after another, but Qing Tong didn't idle either, hesitated slightly, only returned Qin Ping's 2 punches. He really doesn't believe in evil anymore. Qin Pingan is an imposing martial artist with a physical toughness. You have suffered 6 punches in total. Adding Qin Ping's fist, handing the fist itself will damage the Wufu's physique. I'm really not afraid that if I didn't fall, you would fall again? Falling from Guasian is still in the 10th realm, but if it falls from the end to the top of the mountain? Qing Tong's 7 orifices all seeped blood, and it looks hideous, but the injury is not serious. However, the body is small and the movement is not small. A black dragon born from the aftertaste of pure qi lies on the top of a mountain. When it rains and steams, another key acupuncture point, purple sky, rises. Among them is a big white snake as a dragon, a flat square above the huge head, a golden thunder seal carved on a white jade square like a character seal looming. This is the great advantage of the qi trainer and the martial arts. As long as you pass the golden body, the two thresholds of the end, the sky, and many methods, you can cast a furnace and complement each other. It is difficult to distinguish between the magic and the fist. Don't. The eyes of the tall old man once again had a vision, one golden and one silver, shining brightly, but the vision was fleeting. At the same time, between Qing Tong and Chen Pingan, an imperceptible ripple appeared, like a mirror, blocking Chen Pingan. Wearing a bright red robe in the mirror, his punches are exactly the same as Chen Pingan outside the mirror. The person in the mirror is like asking Chen Pingan. Chen Pingan hardly needs to think about it, just closed his eyes, the mirror disappeared instantly, and the mirror was shattered in the next moment. But the strange thing is that this self behind the mirror, that punch is not an illusion, but a real punch that continues to be delivered, but the route remains the same, which is slightly rigid. Without any hesitation, Chen Pingan speeded up the movement of the pure innocent energy again, his fist swelled up a bit, and his figure suddenly speeded up. For the first time he used his left hand and wiped the self with a hand knife. Turn your head. Qing Tong, who had already withdrawn from the battlefield far away, couldn't help but curse. He was so young that he was really hard-hearted. It's right to think about it. At any rate, it is a sword repair that has grown step by step on the battlefield in the bones of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Chen Pingan stopped abruptly, hovering in the air, his figure rickety, his icy eyes flickered, and he continued to maintain the spirit of beating the drums. At the same time he looked around and saw that Qing Tong retreated at the same time he set up a handle. In the mirror, the dozen or so of themselves wearing bright red robes are still in the posture of the previous punch, rushing from all directions to Chen Pingan, who is located in the central area. The people are fake, but the punches are real. I just don't know how long these self can maintain the mirror. Chen Pingan said silently in his heart, his bright red figure resembling a flower blooming suddenly. In fact, he chose the most inferior method in Qing Tong's eyes, as if he was an enemy of himself, and he was also fist to fist. A dozen mirror images were shattered and sputtered almost at the same time, frantically scattered in all directions, and finally the sky was like a bright red rain. For the first time, Chen Pingan spoke with a hoarse voice, as if a grindstone and a knife were mutually forcing each other, and said in a deep voice, "The two sides ask the fist and learn the fist with the fist. But if you are a monk, you can move out of the mountain by means of skill. Fake this fist. I advise you not to do this." Although these quirky mirror images that can imitate Qinping's and Quan Yi for a moment are extremely mysterious and look more like some kind of magical powers of a Qi practitioner, but they are indeed a kind of boxing move. It's just that Qing Tong is outside here and sneaks a little hand and foot. Qing Tong squeezed out an expression that was not smiling, and was somewhat embarrassed to be exposed by a junior on the spot of this unglamorous activity. "I can't hold back one, I will stop there." He already had the innate advantage of a higher realm, and also used magic techniques to steal punches, which was indeed a bit outrageous. Obviously, Qing Tong is still very relaxed in this questioning fist, and that masterful attitude with ease is not a fake. The only problem was that Qing Tong found that Chen Pingan, who had not missed his punches, still seemed to be bottomless. Fang Kaiqing had the 3 punches, although he was far from trying his best, but it fell on the ordinary grandmaster, especially the pure martial artist outside of the monster clan. How could he be half dead? Or is it because the young hidden official with this attitude can't see anything unusual on the surface? What's more, Qing Tong couldn't help but whispered a little bit, just now the two sides exchanged punches so dangerously, this kid can actually separate extra attention and pay attention to all his subtle movements. Qing Tong smiled and said, "The blank world is too boring, so I will set up a battlefield for fun." In the blink of a finger, a city that appeared out of thin air, covering a vast area, might be comparable to the capital of the first dynasty of China's divine continent. Xianglu and Yuyu are lined up in the city, and the city is dotted. Outside the city, there are still mountains stretching, rivers are thousands of miles. There is still a mountain rising suddenly in the plain area, the lonely mountain is high, and the sea of clouds is the belt. Qing Tong stood on the ridge of a large hall. After holding one hand, he spread out the palm of the other hand. "Chen Pingan, I will only accompany you to play incense sticks." The implication is that you are ready to make a serious move, not to help feed your fists anymore? Seeing the violent but pitiful young man, Qing Tong sneered. If the other party had not been a hermit and had the title of a disciple of one Xuanhuan, he was a meritorious person who took great care of the Confucian temple, and there was also that. Xiao Mo goes with him. You can't even see my real body today, let alone the previous fist that couldn't fight back. If you lose the fist at the end, Chen Pingan should give up and leave obediently. In the future, both sides will go their own way even if the well water does not offend the river. I won't delay your checking and filling in the vacancies in Tongyi's Hao, but don't bother me either. Of course, that kind of impulsiveness, why move half of the Great Wall of Jianghu here, this kind of detrimental activities that hurt the enemy by 1,800 and hurt others and disadvantage oneself, don't do it. Qing Tong's momentum changed completely with a little tiptoe, and the hall under his feet was overwhelmed, instantly turning into dust and dust. After the active punch, the bright red robe was used to block his hands, and the whole person was on the ground in the city. Later, a huge gully was cut in the city with his back. The white-haired old man appeared on the street, walking by the gully, strolling leisurely in the courtyard, and asked in a leisurely manner, "Chao Si, and you were in the Gongdalan questioning session? He must have reserved it, specifically how much strength he kept." The reason for this question is that it is not that Qing Tong is deliberately disgusting, or that he looks down on Chen Pingan's martial arts realm. To be able to compare with Chao Si is a kind of high-level look in itself. Nowadays, it is not only Howren world that thinks this way. In fact, except for Feishing City, which is the only one in the colorful world, the other 4 worlds have such a view. Chen Pingan jumped out of the gully, and his robe was still slender and dusty. The next movement made Qing Tong want to laugh when he saw it, but Chen Pingan, who fell to the ground with a punch, jumped slightly as if stretching his muscles and bones. However, Qing Tong didn't laugh too much soon, not jealous of the other party but a kind of anger. Because Qing Tong, who claimed to know a few big amulet, saw the bright red robe around, first the flames flickered and dotted, and then turned into ashes and floated away. It was the scene where dozens of talismans burned all at the same time. Relying on the aura of the remnants of the talisman, Qing Tong, as an ascending master of the talisman, quickly deduced the common effects of the 2 talismans. Used to slow down the body, not only increase the burden on the hands and feet, but also defeat the martial arts body with the body of a monk. In the final analysis, this guy deliberately slowed down his punching. Qing Tong has seen someone who is sharp and arrogant, and he has seen someone who is arrogant, but it is the first time he has encountered someone who is so young and dare to be so big. Do you want to die? It seems that the other party guessed Qing Tong's mind. Although there was no word, Qing Tong also guessed the other party's mind. I can't beat seniors to death, but can you beat me to death just as a martial artist? I don't think so. Qing Tong nodded, and it was not without reason that he hated these sword repairs. Especially a swordsman who practiced boxing and martial arts, young swordsman. Previously, Xiao Mo didn't want to stay in place and get in the way, so he flew out for more than 100 miles, sat down cross-legged, and put the green bamboo staff horizontally on his knees. As a trainer of Qi, Qing Tong is a soaring realm, not much stronger. Otherwise, if I met myself before, this young fellow would not close the door to thank guests and just rush people. The only thing that Xiao Mo is more interested in is the so-called meeting a few big symbols at the end of Qing Tong. There is no definite number for the weight of his own son's fists and feet. The first level of realm is the so-called discussion in the general sense. There are 2 kinds of them. One is to suppress the realm, the pressure is divided into several realms, and the other is to not suppress the realm at all. Then the second level of realm needs to be distinguished, such as the previous questioning boxing with Pushan Huangyun, erasing the half-caddy talisman on the hands and feet. However, the spectators who watched the game at that time still had not enough realm. On the contrary, it was Xiao Mo. Although he did not appear on the Zhanshan Peak, but on the Tsingyi River Luobao Beach, Xiao Mo was still careful. In fact, the sun did not erase it at the time. Of all the talisman, there are still about 2 to 30% of the talisman left, which is used to suppress the speed of punching. It's just that Chen Pingan moved too fast, something happened in an instant, so even Yi Yunyun didn't take it seriously. The last is the current state, which is divided into 2 types. This needs to involve Chen Pingan's mentality. In the end, it is to divide the victory or defeat with others, or to decide life and death. Chen Pingan and Chao Si's questioning punch from Gongdalan to the canopy of the Confucian temple was probably the penultimate type. Although both sides had reservations, there was a gentleman's agreement privately, each of which kept 20% of their strength. Under this premise, the questioning boxing was a hearty and heartfelt fight, each dedicated to their efforts. Step by step. Each step has a different landscape. So today, here and now, Qin Pingan is the last gesture. Xiao Mo raised his eyes and looked over. On the battlefield, the sun punched out, still pleasing the eyes as always. Xiao Mo suddenly remembered something, but he just didn't know if the Pushun Yunkatang family, who was a Qi trainer, could also take into account martial arts, whether it had no relationship with this phoenix tree, or whether it was a kind of qingtong. Open branches and loose leaves? In the distance there was a small path out of thin air, covered with golden phoenix leaves, spreading towards Xiaoma like a spirit snake. Qingtong was previously divided into two without seeing the real body. The pure martial artist outside the body of the Yangshin is asking Qin Pingan, and the Yinshin is traveling far away. Walking on this small road, he is a handsome young man. You are better than a beautiful woman, a guanbo belt, very good looking. Wearing a meticulously refined robe, the real thing is wearing the stars and wearing the moon. On the snow-white robe, there are faintly starlight visions, and a round of precious light and moon phases appear behind him. When Qingtong's Yinshin stopped and was only a few steps away from Xiaoma, twisted his fingers, lit a stick of incense and started timing. Qingtong smiled and reminded, within 2/4 of an hour, if Qin Pingan can't win me, it's about to see off the guests. Xiaoma nodded. When the time comes, you will see off your son and I will see you off. This youthful Yin god, sitting cross-legged, accompanied Xiaoma to look at the arena and exclaimed, "It is very lucky to be reunited with fellow Taoists for 10,000 years. Don't come here without any problems." Youth, whether it is the content of the words or the tone of expression, has an old-fashioned meaning. It's just that in the eyes of Xiaoma, his body is too rotten, and he has no reason to think of an unknown Taoist friend he met on the journey in the past years. 10,000 years ago, 100 flowers blossomed, the sky was high and the earth was wide, unfettered, and the least lack of strange people strange thing. Xiaoma put away some distracting thoughts, smiled and said, "Of course it is lucky for you." Qingtong was silent for a moment and laughed at himself. It's like chatting the sky to death all at once. Because of the implied meaning of this fellow Taoist Shizhu, you have survived by luck, and I can live to this day by my true ability in swordsmanship. Thousands of years ago, even the so-called earthly immortals and ilk of the so-called Taoist scholars were of similar realm, high or low skill, and strong or weak, but they were different from the mud. Jianxia is a well-deserved first-class Taoist. In the world at that time, like this ancestor of the phoenix tree, it was still just normal, indeed very normal. The reason is very simple. Just talk about the vegetation. If the ancestors of all kinds, can you count them? Just talk about how many mountains, rivers, and vegetation on earth were destroyed by the water-fire dispute. Countless. It's like Xiaoma, who once passed by the tree and just looked at it a few times. This is only because the tree was scorched in a big fire without dying, and the dead wood was rejuvenated in spring. On this visit, if Xiaoma wasn't by his side, fellow Taoist? Just a polite word. What kind of friendship is the Tao? The two parties are neither friends nor on the same road. Therefore, this long-distance reunion after 10,000 years is like a son of a wealthy celebrity, sitting and chatting with an upstart who is suddenly wealthy. Qingtong shook his head and said, "If you can become a sword repairman, isn't it a kind of great fortune that you have never missed? Look again at our genus of flowers and plants. No matter how lucky, even if the refining is successful, which one will become a sword repairer? At the beginning of practice, resuscitation is not easy. It is the most difficult part of the spiritual beings. Just refining the form, not to mention that compared to the human race, only to say that it is better than you, there are yuanshou, yangji and the like, we are more than twice the result with half the effort. Before the training was successful, and because of the inability to move, in the face of all kinds of sudden natural and man-made disasters, otherwise the torso would only talk about the rudimentary Taoism and the suffering you suffered. Those who are blessed on the road of spiritual practice don't understand. Floods and floods, fires burning mountains, golden warfare, violent storms and rains, many disasters and so on. Many of your 3 or 2 years of effort seem to be achieved overnight, and it is often the height of the road that we can't find in our lives. In the end, Xiaoma said, "I know what this does." Qing was choked at the same time. This is the stinky virtue that has been sword repaired and will not change for thousands of years. Xiaoma glanced at the incense stick and asked, "Hafa has arrived? Is there such a saying as today in the martial arts?" Qingtong smiled and said, "A person who travels 100 miles is halfway to 90. So Qingtong didn't talk about his martial arts realm, but he was sincere and sincere. Xiaoma noticed the change in the other party's heartstrings and sneered, "The real body dare not come here to talk about the old, so what kind of sincerity is there?" Of course, Qingtong is very clear about one of this fellow Taoist's destiny, and it doesn't matter if Xiao Mo will notice this little noise, but he still joked, "Friend Haiju, follow the young hermit to travel the world for so long. It's time to hear the phrase, don't listen to indecent assaults." This fellow Taoist who was called Xiaoma by Qin Pingan, as one of the ancient great monsters who moved the world, of course has a real name, Mingyu. It is the same pronunciation as the later spider. It's just that these two characters are too uncommon, and as the years have changed there have been several changes in fonts. Nowadays, in addition to the book Shu Wen Jiezi, there are also a few sentences similar to spread silk into a luo, make a net for food, profit in the sporadic records of in the night. Everything else has become a passing moment. Qing Tong knows a lot of feats about Xiaoma. Apart from cultivating swords with swords and being good at catching and fighting each other, he once set up an ambush on one of the tracks of the Tian Dao, in those 2 rounds of the sun and the moon. Cyclically rise and fall, Xiao Mo will capture it, besieging it in the net. First swallow the bright moon, then catch the big sun, swallow that round of bright moon in the belly, has already begun to refine, making great movements. That bright moon, the co-owner asked the blue bird to spread the word of the heavenly thunder department, and then spread the word to the world, to the demon sword repairman who violated the sky to an execution platform to ask for the execution. How could Xiaoma wait to die and suffer a lot of Dao Tian Lei, also handed a lot of officials and gods under the Lei Department Swordsmanship Division, and there are not a few human earth immortals attached to Lei Department. Anyway, this Ascendant Sword Repair Demon clan with both offensive and defensive capabilities will kill one if they encounter one. When you meet a group, kill a group, that escape is simply a sword in practice. In the end, the heavenly court was furious. It was rumored that not only was one of the 12 high-level gods of the Lei Department's chief official, he wanted to capture Xiaoma in person in the lower realms, there would also be another high-level counterpart, but I don't know why, but in the end it was a result of heavy thunder and little rain. Nothing more. But after that, Xiao Mo also continued to converge. Of course, the so-called convergence was much. Compared with the previous lawlessness, rampant and unscrupulous, he accidentally bumped into the Earth Fairy in the hands of this great demon sword repairer, and ended up very badly. Miserable. To be honest, Qing Tong saw Xiao Mo again this time. The latter was so restrained, so implicit in the sword it was surprising. Xiao Mo asked, "Why do fellow Taoists have prejudices against me?" Qing Tong asked in doubt, "When did I have a prejudice against you?" Xiao Mo stretched out his hand and patted the green bamboo stick, smiled and said, "You don't have a big prejudice against Jianxiu? My Xiao Mo is Jianxiu." Qing Tong laughed dumbly and remained silent for a long time before revealing his heart. "You swordsman, you can break the 10,000 magic with one sword, with your eyes above the top, unruly and bloodthirsty. You only care about your own swords and you don't care about the world. Life and death, to treat the practice of the world's Taoists dismissive of them." Xiao Mo nodded, not denying this fact, and asked with a smile, "Have you ever suffered in the hands of Jianxiu?" Qing Tong's face was gloomy when he heard the words, and it was obvious that an old thing in his mind was definitely not a happy thing. Xiao Mo thoughtfully said, "If you don't want to say it, don't force it. Not a person who likes to listen to bitter words, nor is he willing to listen to that. Last words." Qing Tong's body doesn't move at all, only twisting a piece of sycamore leaves with his fingers like a wooden fan. Qing Tong slowly said, "Years ago, 3 young sword repairers traveled together. During this period they had a dispute with a group of armored men who patrolled the world. Unfortunately, I was close to the battlefield and the road was damaged a lot. Those 3 young men later became the pinnacle of the human race, and it was Yuan Xiang Guanzhao Longjun." Qing Tong raised his hand and wiped his cheeks with 2 fingers. A series of small words appeared on his face as if he had been tattooed. He was tattooed on his face. Xiao Mo glanced at it. It was the ancient text, which roughly meant to record the great feats of the fight. He nodded and smiled. It was something Yuanxiang did. Because that Yuanxiang has a detached temperament and domineering, and has always been the cheapest. For example, going to Luobayan to steal wine is also done in Yuanxiang. I endured it once or twice, and there was even a 3rd time. The point is that after Yuanxiang finished drinking, he still said it was not good. Xiao Mo doesn't chop who he chops. Only in the later battle of ascending to heaven, Yuan Xiang was also one of the human sword repairmen who went to death most generously. Even before Yuan Xiang died, he could not see the gate of the old heaven. It is rumored that this person was fighting on the way to the sword. This old sword repairer took the lead in ascending to the sky, getting higher and higher, except that he kept handing his sword, and the sword light was magnificent, and the sword repaired himself, silent and silent, as if he had never stopped. 3 character last words of the opening. I die first. To die resolutely is for the martyrs. Xiaomo asked, except for this personal grudge? Qing Tong sneered. Later there was a last sacrificial officer of the Great Wall of Sword Qi who was sneaky, and he had been here before, and I still had a very unpleasant chat with me. After this person quietly left the Great Wall of Jianxi, he did not go straight to the Lizhu Cave of Aquarius Island, but landed on Tongya Island first. Qing Tong once said a few words that were close to each other, and ended up with a similar fate with a hot face and a cold butt. Of course this is not the most important thing. There are other reasons why we can't agree. It's just that there is no need to talk about it with Xiaomo in detail. After that, there was a young man from outside the town who was not yet a sword repairman. From Fuzhong to the land of Tonghishao, he carried a long sword called Sword Qi Chang at that time. It is Qin Kingdom saber that has been abandoned for many years. Just like the old sword immortal of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, clearly separated by a world, he just warned Qing Tong to protect the road for the young man without being conceited in such a way that he didn't need to go out himself. Your Qin Qingdu, even if the young man named Qin carries the sword, it's okay to give me a word. Or with some easy little secret technique, Yu Qin Qing would say hello secretly to me. How difficult is it? Back then, among the many human sword repairs, Qin Qing was not the best in aptitude, the speed of cultivation was not the fastest, and the rank of flying sword was not the highest, but it was this person in the end who reached the highest point of swordsmanship. Moreover, Qin Qing is regarded as one of the best reputations compared to the defiant sword repairs of all ethnic groups. He has always been reticent and never causes trouble. He only practices swords diligently, rarely goes out and travels, and has a handful of long trips. Only a series of facts later proved. Those who have always been silent occasionally speak with thunder. Xiaomo tut and said, my fellow Taoist, what's the matter with you? Is it congenital inconsistent with Jian Xiu? Qing Tong was non-committal about this. Looking at the battlefield, he asked curiously, are you not worried about Chen Ping'an at all? Xiaomo was silent. The son is thoughtful and does not need outsiders to worry about. Now Xiaomo's only thought was to think about how to persuade the son after the fact to allow himself to express his sword in pain. Not talking about his status as a dead man, only talking about obedience. They are almost incompetent. Coming to Tonghishao, especially after entering this place, Xiaomo knew something a little bit. No wonder Tonghishau's Kendo Chiyun would be the least among the Hauran 9 continents. Regardless of the total number of sword repairs or the number of top sword repairs, this Tonghishao can be called shabby. Of course, it is not to say that Qing Tong's natural rejection of Jian Xiu can completely dominate the situation, creating a bleak pattern with a small number of sword immortals in front of him. Qing Tong is a phoenix tree and he really doesn't have this capability. Just because it sits on a continent of mountains and rivers, it is imperceptible. Over time, the accumulation of less and more, the upward and downward effects, the impact is far-reaching. In the end, the entire Tonghishao, the sect, the monks, the hearts of the people, the time and the place, and the people began to tend and deviate, forming an active choice. And the non-moving nest of a phoenix tree, and the closure of the entire Tonghishao, like to close the door and sit in the well to watch the sky, it can be regarded as a kind of invisible avenue fit. Generally speaking, it is a simple old saying that it is not that one family does not enter a family. Taoist Bixiao Luobeatan is like the head of the family behind the scenes of Tonghishao, and of course, there is also the matchmaker in front of the stage, Qing Tong, to maintain this family business together. It's a pity that this fellow Bixiao Taoist has already gone to the Qingming world. Otherwise, the sun will be a lot smoother in Tonghishao. The Azure Een god, while watching the battle, stretched out his hand to roll up a strand of hair on his temples, looked at the dust of the city and asked with a smile, isn't he worried about his safety at the moment? Before, I only used the friendship of the landlord, which was a treat for Chen Ping'an, and the young hidden official was about to relax. Qing Tong pretended to turn his head and closed his eyes, not looking at the plowing scene after the scarlet robe was knocked down the street. If you take the initiative to punch, your son will be helpless. A stick of incense, 3/4 of an hour, will it be too difficult? If Chen Ping'an fell into a state by accident and was carried back to Xindu Mountain to participate in the Zongmen ceremony, wouldn't it be great? The old talent who had not been restored to the Confucian temple for a long time, would he be reluctant to take care of himself, fake his own business for his own sake, and avenge his personal revenge? In fact, the most jealous of Qing Tong nowadays is not someone else, it is the literary sage of the 3 continents. Xiaomo smiled and said, only embroidered pillows who have not played a few games, and who have not really experienced the battle of life and death, will ask this idiot question. Then Xiaomo added, I'm sorry, I'm just discussing matters, not aiming at fellow Taoists. Qing Tong chuckled. Not underestimating the enemy, but at a certain height, after all, there are still upper limits and bottlenecks. In particular, Qin Pingan traveled through the barren world and fell into a descent. Otherwise, even if it is Chao Ci who is on his way in the martial arts, if he is only a layer of vigor and travels to this point, what can he do to the pure martial artist who has reached the top half? Before that, Qin Pingan was at the gate of the Tapingshan site in Tonggishao, where he was on the first level of dynamism, and he was the strongest before he went to the mountain. The momentum was great, the movement was great, and Qing Tong's ears and eyes were well versed, and he was aware of it at that time. It's just that Qin Pingan and Han Yushu of the Wanyao sect of Sanshan blessed land at that time, one relied on the magical powers of the flying sword, and the other relied on the talisman to form a small world. Qing Tong did not dare to explore wantonly. Sitting there is Jiang Shangzhen from Yuguizhang. The territory of Tonggishao is very large, almost equivalent to 2 Aquarius continents, but the phoenix tree has been rooted here for thousands of years, just like in the depths of the earth, the fellow Shizhu Taoist learning that beside him has formed a spider web. A continent with vast mountains and rivers, ordinary wind and grass, don't need it to know, it doesn't bother to know, but as long as it is the kind of people and things that can make its heart tremble, Qing Tong cherishes its own behavior, public and private. We'll try to find out. For example, the stinky bull nose of the Taoist temple in the East China Sea had shot the sword-backed old ape. It knew it but did not dare to mix it up from beginning to end. After all, Qing Tong still has the identity of a town demon building, but there is no rest. Zhen Bei's inside the 8 male town buildings was so straightforward. 14 realm monks are extremely rare at first, and count them, adding up a few worlds together, the mountain tops are just a handful. And this very old veteran master is also the most famous among this small group of mountain monks on earth, the most notoriously unstable temperament, treacherous mind, and brilliant means. Known as the most proud scholar in the world, Bai Yi holding a fairy sword, is undoubtedly the most powerful. The undefeated golden body of the monk Xinqing is the first, and it is also recognized by several people in the world. And the old Guanza's supernatural powers are vast, seemingly untouched, but since he can share the same fame as the old blind man of the Shihuan Dashan mountain, Bai Yi and Xinqing, the 2 14-realm great monks, Qing Tong has seen it with his own eyes, heard it with his own ears, and even experienced it in person. Just to talk about one thing, there are a few cultivators in the world who have been asking with Taoist ancestors for thousands of years. And this Bixiao cave master, who once claimed to be invincible from the cave, able to forgive others and not forgiving others, and now the little Mo in the yellow hat and blue shoes, is an extremely good fellow Taoist. This was a thing known to the world and the immortals thousands of years ago. It is a kind of incense that can't be desired and envied. It's not who clings to each other, it's just a kind of congeniality between the strong and the great agreement. Thinking of this, Qing Tong couldn't help sighing, "Little stranger, with your realm and identity, you can't go anywhere. Why don't you go to heaven and practice your sword, slowly get out of the 14 realms, and then return to the world?" Xiao Mo turned his head when he heard the words, stared in a daze and asked, "You can call Xiao Mo too?" Qing Tong was silent for a moment. As I said before, it was Qin Pingan who was more serious in killing, not this ancient sword repairer who used the Zazudo name. But at this moment, it was instantly upside down. It was just that Xiao Mo quickly ignored Qing Tong because Qin Pingan removed all fullness on the streets of the city for the first time. Seeing this scene, this King Tanjian laughed suddenly as if he couldn't help it. At first there was a bit of restraint, and then the laughter became irresistible. After all, he finally stopped his smile and lowered slightly. Head, stretched out a finger, wiped the corners of his eyes, laughed intermittently, straightened his face, coughed a few times, turned his head and said to Xiao Mo, I'm sorry, I really feel funny, I can't help it. Forgive sins and forgive sins." Xiao Mo didn't feel angry when he exposed this kind of heartfelt emotion to Qing Tong. If you talk about the previous questioning boxing in the blank world, both sides are practicing, warming up, and discussing. So now in that city, both sides of the confrontation are beginning to show some real skills. When the burly old man handed his fist, he unintentionally exposed a section of his arm, and dense golden talisman characters appeared on the top, which were actually engraved on the bones under the muscles. The content of the text includes an article on the Taoist art of the immortal family, a Buddhist classics, and various long-lost ancient runes. Qing Tong's entire arm is like being refined into a mountain of white bones, and on the cliffs, there are countless inscriptions on the cliffs like fairy talismans, which are used to toughen the mountain and stabilize the peaks in mountains. In the end, one arm is a dragon vein. In addition, the flesh and veins of the skin, on the contrary, look like some dispensable vassals. A bright red robe was smashed into a tall city wall, his elbows opened the gravel, and he forcibly pulled himself out of the wall. However, Qin Ping'an's forehead and chest were hit by Qing Tong in succession, but he did not hit the iron while it was hot, because Qing Tong, who had the upper hand in exchange for 2 punches, noticed that Qin Ping's punch was unusual. This punch is not too heavy, but the box is quite difficult. There are several key chi palaces in Qing Tong's body, and the movement is not small, and on the arm of the seal-carved talisman, there are hundreds of golden characters and a few talisman pictures. Became dim and dull almost instantly, falling like ash and rustling. After that, Qing Tong became more cautious. A touch of bright red wandering in the streets, a white rainbow will be much sharper, all in a straight line, straight to the bright red robe that looks like a fish scurrying, and the buildings are broken and exploded along the way. Once it is caught by Qing Tong, if he succeeds, Qin Ping'an often smashes hundreds of feet, just like cutting out a door in a city. On the other hand, Qing Tong, even if he gets a punch, is mostly staggered, and he will soon return to Qin Ping'an. Take color. The only thing that was wrong, Qing Tong found that Qin Ping'an, together with the previous boxing move that could break the golden talisman, was always repeatedly using 5 boxing moves, like a kind of temporary holding Buddha's feet, from the earliest a little strange to the gradually proficiency, growth in fist, cannot be said to be a rapid advance, but with the same eyesight, it can be said that the change of the opponent's first and last punches, only the improvement in skills, can be said to be visible to the naked eye. Qing Tong kicked the guy upside down for more than 100 feet, and the young Wufu directly punched a wealthy mansion through his back. Under a big tree in the street outside the wall, the bright red robe gently touched the trunk with his elbow. Stop the figure. Along the brand new road, Qing Tong slowly walked out of the hole in the wall, smiled and asked, "Create your own?" If it weren't for the intent of these punches to be incomplete, it would be a good punch that the world is waiting for. Qin Ping'an smiled and said, "He created it. It is Chao Si's 5 styles of boxing." Before the Confucian temple asked about fist, Chao Si frankly said that he had created more than 30 kinds of fist moves, and less than half of them were used at that time. Qin Ping'an has imitated 5 of them today: the Epiphany, the Running Water, and the Dragon Gossip. Lingjiu Mountain. Xinxiao. Chao Si didn't mind others learning boxing at all. Most of them cannot learn. The handful of martial artists who were barely able to catch up with Chao Si's back were not much better. Those who learn from me live, those who resemble me die. This kind of remarks may be arrogant to others, and it is inevitable that there is a bit of suspicion of condescending preaching. But for Chao Si, it might really be an extremely calm truth. Even Qin Ping'an doesn't really want to learn these punches. The only use is to change the way to beat his body. Different fist moves, fist techniques, and principles can sharpen the different boundaries of a person's physical body. Qing Tong laughed and said, "Is it also stealing punches?" Qin Ping'an corrected, "Learning boxing." Qing Tong wondered, "Is there a difference?" When speaking, Qing Tong's feet intertwined with thunder and lightning, such as pedaling 2 thunderboards. It is still a boxing method, but the effect is equivalent to the xianxia shrinking ground method. Qing Tong had already reached out his hand to hold down the forehead of the bright red robe, and ran forward all the way, and at the same time he delivered a punch quickly and hit the opponent's throat. It doesn't matter whether you steal fist or learn fist as an end martial artist who can't. With this fist, Qing Tong is exactly like Qin Ping'an's drum-beating style. The 5 fingers of his right hand are like a hook, and he firmly presses down on that forehead. Although his right hand is like hitting a rapidly rotating millstone, even the 5 fingers ooze blood and a tiger's mouth. After splitting, Qing Tong's left hand is still punching, but I want to see if his bulging fist intent can support more than 20 punches, and the other party can carry a few punches, whether his fist intent is broken first, or the opponent's physique was the first to show signs of cracking. In the blink of an eye, Qing Tong delivered 19 unknown punches one after another, and both sides had already walked out several miles in the city. During the period, Qin Ping'an suddenly accelerated the retreat figure 3 times, and Qing Tong followed the gourd to draw a scoop, just at the same speed as Qin Ping'an, like a cat teasing a mouse. However, Qing Tong had to admit that his 19 punches were not light, but it was a pity that they didn't mean enough. The exchanges between the masters of martial arts, learning boxing is simple and simple. It is easy to be like 7 or 8 fractals, but it is difficult to say that it is difficult to learn boxing, because it is difficult to get its essence, and it is difficult to accurately see through each other's pure mouth. The circulation route of true energy, and this path is like a fairy parent's doctrine with complicated text and obscure content. For the mountain realm, especially the end martial artist, if it is just a fist to learn a similar shape, then what's the point? However, Qingtong is not discouraged at this moment, and it is a big deal that he will repeatedly practice hundreds of thousands of punches in the future. If hundreds of thousands are not enough, then millions of punches. The world's boxing moves are all dead after all. Only the person who handed the fist is alive. Qingtong stood still and replaced pure Jinqi for the first time. Both sides had left the city. Qin Pingan fell to the ground in the distance like a broken kite. Qingtong smiled and said, "It's almost a quarter of an hour before a stick of incense. Can you do it?" Qin Pingan stood up, took a deep breath, and exhaled a breath of despair. Suddenly he seemed to have changed himself, from the old man who had not waved in the past to a young man with high spirits, and reached out his hand to his waist. The hilt of the narrow sword smiled and said, "If you only talk about the height of the boxing technique, it is really difficult for you to match the half-god, or is it that you are the best at using weapons?" With arms around his chest, Qingtong smiled and said, "Even if I'm bare-handed, wouldn't it be more than enough to beat you?" What's more, Qingtong didn't really put out his punches. I was afraid that if one was not careful, he would hit the opponent heartily, and if he failed to hold his hand he would beat the opponent down, or simply kill the opponent directly. Qingtong glanced at the folded knife on the other's waist and stretched out a hand. "If you use a knife, you can do whatever you want." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "You seem to have forgotten to say, after 2/4 of an hour, how do we count win or lose?" Qingtong said, "Then fight until one party admits defeat?" Qin Pingan nodded and said, "Of course." Slowly pulled the Xianxia knife out of its sheath. The narrow knife was extremely long and bright as water. Qin Pingan opened his palm again and actually grabbed the blade directly, and stretched out his hand. The sharp blade, if ordered, glowed with a weird and extremely colorful color. Qingtong is slightly confused. Is this okay? To be precise, the opponent is not cheating. Qin Pingan didn't use monk's methods, it was more like a temporary casting, tempering? Qingtong suddenly asked, "Is that really that Xianxia?" Qin Pingan, who held the knife in his right hand, did not directly answer the question. He drew the knife out of the sheath again with his left hand and said with a smile, "Guess again." Qingtong's heart was shaken. Staring at the guy with the knife in both hands, Qingtong smelled a dangerous breath. Qingtong didn't underestimate the slightest thoughts anymore, and instead took the initiative to start another ancient boxing frame. A majestic fist is actually like that monk's appearance around Qingtong. A strange picture is revealed. Some people play the people with only the head and limbs but no trunk. A headless man with his hands like a flute. Only the upper body of the woman is left, stroking the chin as if being cut off by a guqin. Those with or without arms, there are jianghu hanging on their sides, shaking their heads and shaking their heads, making a slap of jianghu. All kinds of strange shapes are incredible. And what makes Qingtong most annoyed is the execution, held by one of the legendary 12 high-level gods. Regarding this magic weapon, just the phrase, "The one who is fortunate to see this blade is misfortune," let Qingtong feel a kind of disgust and fear. If it is said to be a slashing survey, it is only the genus who is the most overwhelming flood dragon. Then this execution, that has disappeared for thousands of years, after this life, I believe that no matter it is a pure martial artist or a cultivator, no one wants to see this blade with his own eyes. Qin Pingan walked forward, holding a knife in both hands, and one of the swords glowed with colorful colors, and the execution of the execution on the side of the blade was actually pitch black, as if opening up a two-virtual boundary, especially at the tip of the knife. Dragging an extremely slender glazed light beam was actually a horrible sight of some kind of sharp blade cutting through the long river of time, and that bright red robe did not rush and smiled. Instead of waiting until I have been hit by countless knives, this pair the immortal is broken and severely damaged. It takes hundreds of years to repair it. At that time, Qingtong's predecessors will take out hand weapons to contend with it. Will it be too late? Isn't the loss of face even greater? If it's me, don't pay attention to trivial things. Be pragmatic. Of course, winning this competition is the top priority. The earth trembled violently and thunder burst deep in the ground. Qin Pingan was no longer visible, and a large hole appeared at his feet. The lute player with only his head and torso was broken with a single knife. The headless flute player with a flute on his body flashes the light of the knife and turns into powder. Only the upper body of the woman playing the piano was cut through her chest, and she appeared in a bright red robe. She stretched out her arms and held a narrow knife to lift the former into the air. The body shape transfer and the speed of the knife are really too fast. Qin Pingan seems to be in a situation where people go with their fists. This should be a taboo of martial arts. Qing Tong had retreated to the top of the city, overlooking the sword-bearer outside the city. The other person seemed to be laughing silently. Those visions are only half-truths condensed by fist and will not hurt Qing Tong's physique at all, but the guy in his sight made Qing Tong feel jealous for the second time. For the first time, it was just execution of this external object. This time it was that person. It's so weird. Not the kind of blindly perverse, cruel, and tyrannical. But it is the kind of cold, dead silence, pure ruthlessness and inaccurate. It's like human nature has gone to the other extreme. Qing Tong didn't dare to take the slightest care, stretched out his hand, and condensed a huge weapon similar to a chopped saber aquamarine, with seal-carved talisman layer upon layer, and the light circulated. Standing on the top of the city, Qing Tong held the knife in both hands, went around behind, the back of the knife was attached to his back and sneered, "The blade has no eyes. If unfortunately you lack arms and legs, don't blame the heavens and others. This is what you asked for." Chen Pingan twisted his wrist lightly, and instantly shattered the graceful figure of the woman with the piano. He raised his head, looked at the white-haired old man and said with a smile, "Tell you a truth, you are not a master at fighting." The Qing Tong Yin who was watching the battle from a distance had always been quite leisurely. When Chen Pingan pulled out the execution he couldn't sit still, and then waited until Chen Pingan made his move, and then forced the Yangshin body back to on the top of the city. He threw away the golden leaf in his hand, turned his head and asked, "What's the matter?" Xiaomo held the hiking stick with both hands. "Ask yourself. Yin God and Yang God are connected with each other and can be regarded as one person." Qing Tong Yin Shin sighed, "It's hard to end the fight like this." Xiaomo was a little surprised how he felt this Yin God was a bit unusual. But it doesn't matter, Xiaomo's attention is still on the battlefield where the two sides return to the city. What anxious, this is just the beginning of the show. In fact, Xiaomo didn't know what the son thought about this questioning boxing, and how exactly he planned it. Xiaomo only knows one thing, the son hasn't really given a killer tip yet, which means that there is still a fight in this fight. Because Chen Pingan had leaked the details to Xiaomo. There are only 2 moves to create your own boxing technique, which is connected with swordsmanship. One of the punches, named Pinyue by Chen Pingan, is the latter of the extremes of simplicity and complexity. The first time he performed this fist was in Dali capital city, to clean up the proud man of heaven who had almost caused a catastrophe. The reason why Qi practitioners are the least willing to provoke sword repair, the most troublesome aspect of Jianxiu's life, flying sword, is not only the arrogance and unreasonableness of one sword breaking 10,000 laws, but also that after flying sword hurts people, the remaining sword energy will last for a long time. Making waves will cause a kind of lasting damage and destruction to the small world of the human body. This is the case with Chao Si's Eastern Flower, and Chen Pingan's Pianyu, is even more true. If this punch is hit on an opponent, the fist will spread extremely quickly and concealed, just like in the enemy's Xiaoshandy Mountain in Hanoi, there will be countless. The cliff carvings of Dagua Wafu are almost irreversible. What remains is the legacy of the avenue. If the injured want to repair, they can only grind away those stone carvings. Xiaomo glanced at the fallen sycamore leaves that Qing Tong had discarded. One leaf, one world is a picture scroll similar to a horse-drawn picture, but it doesn't involve the long river of time. Otherwise, if Qing Tong could draw so much time and water, he would have been a cultivator of the 14th realm long ago. The mountain leaders of Tonggizhao are Tonggizong and Yuguizong, who are facing each other from the north to the south. This involves an illusion from many years ago. These 2 long-lasting ancestors did not appear out of thin air, but came into being. According to the son, the former little master, who is now the saint of rites, had made some attempts. I first met Andy Feng in a fire temple in Dali capital, because those Baihuan Yangs made of 10,000 years of soil were sealed by Chen Pingan. He guessed that the wine is a kind of tribute. Speaking, he first mentioned a thread, talked about 3 tribute objects, and actively talked about the 6 palaces of the Ghost Mansion of Fengdu Ghost Mansion, and the great authority of Feng's Hushin Qingjun. Dixian's Thin Book. In short, these are some new etiquette formulated by the ritual saints. Later, Chen Pingan followed the vine and asked more inside information with his husband in private. At the same time, Li Xing had personally invited Mr. Sanshan Jiuho. According to the secret revealed by Lu Qin, Chen Pingan believed that Mr. Sanshan Jiuho was willing to cooperate with Li Xing in the era of Tai Ping Huanyu Shou, when he erected a monument. Re-emergence to help the Saint of Rites reorder the sky, originally used specifically to target the world's ghosts. Chen Pingan guessed that if the ritual saint's move was successful and all-encompassing, it is estimated that there would be no subsequent battle to slay the dragon. But this is not the most exaggerated place. The other thing that the husband said is the real shocking world. There was once a chance to give birth to the Lord of humanity in the world. This is an extremely risky move, which is tantamount to a way out of the Saint of Rites. And once it proves to be effective, then the status of the Confucian temple may not rise but fall, but will take advantage of the trend to go down a step, just like the temple officials of later generations, assisting the monarch of the righteousness, and create a 10,000-year-old temple. Some Haiyan Qingping's life. After that, Qin Pingan went through the secret files in the Gongda Lin of the Confucian temple. As expected, there was an unexpected gain. It was during that period that one of the masters of the Middle-earth divine continent once cut a leaf of tong leaf into a square shape and gave it to my younger brother. This is the so-called Tongye Fengdi, and one leaf Feng Ho, on the Confucian temple Gongda Lin secret file. He founded the country on the bank of the big water named Fendu in Tonggishao, the main tributary of Dadu at that time. There are Huiha and Shujiang. Today, the buried river of the Daquan dynasty and the Lin River are just one of the inconspicuous river sections and tributaries back then. It is a pity that no matter what the reason is, the Saint of Rites failed to accomplish this after all. The battle within the city almost destroyed half of the city. Every time the blade hits, it is a torrential rain of sparks splashing all over, and the buildings on both sides are like falling leaves swept away by the autumn wind. Qing Tangjian's face was solemn, and he was at a loss for his carefully crafted magic knife, which was of extremely high rank. Xiao Mo stretched his waist and asked, "What is the origin of the Taoist priest who is respected by my son as Lu Zhu?" Qing Tong was a little absent-minded and replied casually, True man Chunyang is a true Taoist man. His hometown is in the vast world, but the place of fame is the Qingming world, which is known as the #1 golden pill. He once traveled. After passing the lotus root flower blessed land and seeing the old master at first sight, the old Hao master and Yuan Pin of the blessed land of the cloud cave, and later Yu Zhini to a certain extent, imitated the real person of Chunyang. There is an ancient chess record with a pure Yang Taoist, which is unknown and not widely spread. The wandering Taoist has a poem in the preface of the chess record, and he is invincible from the whole, and he has to be forgiving and forgiving. Therefore, people of insight, according to the naming habits of many handed-down copybooks, are known as Lan Ku Pu, also known as Chu Dong Pu. A full spectrum of 9 chess principles, a total of 36 chess games. It was a chess book compiled by the real person of Chunyang after he traveled to the blessed land of lotus roots. When the Taoist left the blessed land, the old Guanju seemed to appreciate the foreigner who was not high in his realm, and he personally sent his gift out of the country. Tonggis his central boundary, which was later the Great Spring Dynasty riding Crane City, and this was the site where the fairy riding a crane soared. Like the red leaves in the ditch, it is often related to the poem. There are many poems in Haoran, and whenever they talk about Wutong they are often related to wells. For example, the introductory purple mandarin duck, Jingjing double phoenix tree. There are also similar trips to the country but also a long dream. The parasol tree fell into the well and a leaf flew into the Milky Way. The gate of the lotus root flower blessed land is actually a well. Regarding this point, Qin Pingan, who is currently on the battlefield, must have personal experience. Inside the city there was a battlefield where the dust was scattered. The white-haired old man, with blood oozing from the corners of his mouth, especially the entire arm holding the knife, almost all muscles collapsed. The outer body of this young god looked at the bright red man who stood up from the ruins and couldn't help but sigh. It's not a human being. If this guy had lost the Yin god and the Yang god body for reasons of harmony, otherwise the 3 plus the double swords and the long sword hovering outside the city would be a tricky one. Qing Tong Yin god glanced at that stick of incense intentionally or unintentionally. Xiao Mo smiled and said, "Is this a feng shui turn?" Qing Tong changed the subject. "I didn't want to find old friends in the Qingming world?" Xiao Mo smiled and said, "Don't worry." Qing Tong hesitated to speak but stopped. Xiao Mo said, "I know that until now you in the city still have something to hide. You have to wait for the moment when 2/4 of an hour is over." Qing Tong shook his head and said, "If there is no restriction on a stick of incense and if you drag it on, Qin Pingan will definitely lose even if he has those 2 knives. Xiao Mo wondered, whose handwriting is for a stick of incense for 2/4 of an hour? Qing Tong is helpless. Within the rules allowed by the Confucian temple, some of the benefits related to the luck of mountains and rivers, the Qingtong Town Demon Tower and the detached Taoist temple, both share the spoils in the same way. However, Guandao Temple only pins the tip, and on the side of the parasol tree, there is a bit of cold leftovers. In the far-reaching Taiping Mountain turmoil that year, an old ape with a sword on his back killed the gentleman Zhong Kuei of Dafu Academy. Because according to the deduction result of the Wild Army account, Zhong Kuei was said to be equivalent to 5 fairyland sword repairs. After the white ape succeeded, it was immediately returned to Taiping Mountain by the angry Lord Tian. He held the moon mirror and chased him for thousands of miles. The white ape was severely injured, and finally escaped to a broken dragon vein. The young Taoist priests of Taiping Mountain converged, and then they were easily found by the master of the old temple. In a summer resort called Fendu Dragon Palace, the master of old temple accidentally appeared and stood on the ruins of Solongtai. It is similar to a kind of family law service, which was the place where lynching was used in Dadu Longgong in the early years. Among them, the white ape was thrown into the lotus flower-blessed land by the old Taoist priest. He lost all his wisdom and had to practice again. The young Taoist priests simply did not agree with each other, and all their incomplete souls were removed from their bodies and their skins were limp. The former floated out of his body, and was choked by the neck by the old Taoist priest, while the latter's fate was exactly the same as that of a white ape. It's really just because of one sentence, a decent title. Call the old master of the predecessor. As a result, on the side of the old Guanju, it became, "You are a demon race, you keep calling my seniors calling yourself juniors? Call me an old beast?" It's just that the remnant soul of this monster race is about 1 soul and 4 souls. The old Guanju did not have a sleeve to make it ashes. Instead, he opened a side to it and deliberately left the hibiscus crown, and left it together on the stage of the Locked Dragon. However, he did not let the other party rush around, so that the spirit of this great demon was detained in the crown of the road, firmly nailed to the roots of the mountain in the prison site of Taiping Mountain. Have not been able to get out of trouble so far. The old Guanju also secretly shot, concealing the sky and crossing the sea with the sky-reaching means, which is equivalent to reserving a part of the mountain, water and air transport for the gathering of the Taiping Mountains, and will not completely disperse. Otherwise, after that battle, the monks of Taiping Mountain would be dead, and the whole mountain top was broken everywhere. It was just a Diabolo basket of dilapidated sieve. Tongisao was vulnerable to a blow, and it was immediately occupied by the monster army. It was probably when Heist's careful show of favor to the old master, and did not move the crown or the Taiping Mountain. The site was opened as a mountain water ferry. It was just a reward for the demon monk who had been hiding in the Howren for many years, and for the real body where the rest of the soul was. The big demon on one side. In fact, this is why the boundary of the Tapingshan site still has a lingering remnant Dao rhyme after the moon mirror is completely broken. Only then did several local forces, including Xianxia, come to covet the tastelessness of Taiping Mountain. The old View Master was on the dragon-locking platform, and certain words were, "great rebelliousness." He heard the trembling of the young fellow's heart, but he couldn't help but listen, and he couldn't do it if he wanted to be a deaf person. Obviously he was forcibly pulled into a thief boat by that stinky old man. During the period, the old Guanju said something similar to the conclusion of a coffin to the junior. Not daring to kill Qin Pingan is tantamount to missing a great opportunity. Because if you kill this person you will have great merit in the wild world. The old master can also take advantage of the trend to bring Qin Pingan into the Taoist temple, raising the position of the futon a lot. The so-called futon of the stinky nose, of course, is the entire Guandao temple, which is a blessed lotus root bordering the lotus cave sky. As for why Qin Shengdu lent Qin Pingan's sword, Lao Guanju gave part of the truth at that time. The purpose is to transfer certain cause and effect to Qin Pingan's shoulders. When he was young he carried a sword on his back and went back to the Howren world from the Hanging Mountain. There is a town demon building in Tongisao, and enter the lotus root's blessed land. The young hermit bears the real name of the great demon. Hadao half the Great Wall of Jianghu. One person defended the city and luckily survived. See the sun again. Time is also fate? Time ya. One drink and one peck, is it natural? Xiao Mo glanced at the incense stick, stretched out his hand to grab the trekking stick and slowly stood up. A stick of incense is about to burn out. Qing Tong asked, "Should you be?" Just breathed a sigh of relief because the outcome was a foregone conclusion, but when Xiao Mo got up, Qing Tongyin God had to tighten his heartstrings again. "Is it because you want bad rules to choose to shoot?" Xiao Mo smiled and said, "You want something wrong." The battlefield has already moved outside the city, and the two sides have replaced each other with a sigh of pure infuriance. Just across the big mountain with a single peak, the two sides are located in front of the mountain and behind the mountain. I traveled many places with Xiaomo. In addition to repeatedly practicing the sword light escape technique, Qin Pingan, in addition to retreating in the cave of the Shindu mountain, is more like a real cultivator. He is indeed practicing seriously. As for the practice of martial arts and boxing, and outsiders may think it is very simple, but when done, it is no different from ascending to the sky. Half punch. Repeatedly only practice half punches. But there is always no way, and it can even be said to be no way to enter. Since you can't even seem to look like a god, how can you talk about it? And this half fist happened to be embedded in the mountains and rivers of Qin Pingan's body. It was a half punch of an 11th realm martial artist. A bright red robe was put into its sheath, and he began to sweep backwards, and only when he was hundreds of miles away from the high mountain, he began to rush forward. Suddenly Qin Pingan's figure disappeared out of thin air. In order to deliver this punch, Qin Pingan even had to quickly take off 2 narrow knives and throw them away before his body dissipated. Xiaomo slightly grasped the green bamboo stick in his hand, squinted and stood still. The hair of King Tanjian God's temples fluttered wanton, his expression flustered, and his voice was as thin as a mosquito and flies. Not far away, the ground covered with golden leaves began to drift towards the same side. After the mountain, the white-haired old man who had also reached the peak with his fist, suddenly widened his eyes because there was no mountain in front of him. End of this chapter. Sword of Coming Chapter 926. Before receiving the punch, Qingtong's young god suddenly had an old armor on his body. This punch was too weird. Since it was impossible to fight against and was destined to be unavoidable, Qingtong had no choice but to carry a punch. In addition to the snow-white robe, he added a pair of armor to protect his physique. Obviously, Qingtong didn't feel that he was a half-talented martial artist, and that he could really take this punch completely without relying on foreign objects. After a punch, the treasure of the white-haired old man shattered like a mirror, shooting out like countless meteors. Moreover, the burly figure of the old Wufu began to fall to the ground, but it was not a straight line, just because this world was like a wrinkled paper ball picked up by a young child at will. In this time, the direction of the long river of time has gone beyond secular knowledge. The so-called directions are all false: northeast, southeast, northwest, up and down, left and right, all twisted and folded. As a result, many seemingly adjacent land boundaries are thousands of miles away from each other, and many seem to be separated by hundreds of thousands of miles, but they are only a few inches away, one step away. This makes the white-haired old man's figure, like a glass bead hitting a bamboo tube, swaying and running around. Under normal circumstances, such a pure martial artist who is in the end sits in this kind of world, and it is a nightmare to stand in it and oppose the air trainer. When the burly old man finally stopped, he tried his best to stabilize the chaotic weather of the mountains and rivers in his body. He looked down and saw the broken armor on his body. The old man spit out a mouthful of blood and peeled off all the broken armors. He waved his hand again and gathered the world. The rest of the scattered fragments of shattered armor, together with the fragments around them, eventually recovered into a bleak and dull jia pill. Qingtong was distressed, and finally repaired this ancient armor to the extent that he could be hung on his body. If he wanted to restore it to its original appearance, he didn't know it was going to be the year of the monkey. I just have to admit that Qin Pingan's punch is a bit heavy. Qingtong raised his hand, wiped off the blood stains on his face, shook his wrists and dropped the blood to the ground, blending into the world, and curiously asked, "Where did the fist come from?" Never believe that Qin Pingan created his own boxing technique. Qin Pingan spreads his hands, and far behind him, the 2 long swords that were taken off before if he was ordered, only because Qingtong has not hidden the trajectory of Xiaotian and Dao Fa, the trajectory route of the survey will retreat with Qingtong. The shape was almost the same, with 7 bends and 8 turns, suddenly and unexpectedly, but the execution was a straight line, completely ignoring the restrictions of heaven and earth, and directly returned to Qin Pingan's hands. Wearing a bright red robe, holding knives in both hands, the narrow knives swayed slightly, and the light flow of the 2 knives overflowed with different trajectories. The white-haired old man seemed to pull the corners of his mouth when he saw that guy, and the sarcasm was very obvious. Endless Takeo is true and pure Takeo is fake. It's really just a little bit of a martial artist's end, and it can only rely on a long time of polishing the body. After Qin Pingan's punch, just 2/4 of an hour later, a stick of incense was burned out. In the distance, Xiaomo turned his head and looked at the Qingtong Yin god beside him, smiling and jokingly, "Friends of Qingtong Daoist, you still have some family background. To live a long time, one thing is good, it is knowledgeable because he is an ancient Taoist on the front page of the old almanac, so you can easily know the truth without having to read the secret files that have eaten thousands of years. For example, the armor draped on the burly old man in his eyes, Xiaomo could see the roots and feet of the great Tao at a glance. The youthful-looking Qing Tongyin god had a wry smile on his face. This treasure is one of the means of pressing the bottom of the box. The Zhongtu Confucian temple once lent it to the town's demon building, but now Qing Tong is credited with taking it into his bag. It's a pity that he has been mending for many years, but because Qing Tong is not good at refining, he has been making slow progress. As a result, today's shitful questioning boxing was beaten back to its original shape. The armored man, one of the 5 highest in the ancient heaven, took the armor on his body as a prototype. There have been 3 divine armors regarded as second-class authenticity. They are the casters of one of the 12 high-level gods. They are getting the fire, and with the permission of the water god, he picked the essence of the sun, and then used the of fire as one of the palaces as a furnace, and used the long river of time as the water for tempering. It took a long time and was carefully tempered and imitated. The shopkeeper Xiao Mo saw at Feishancheng liquor store, Zheng Deifeng's predecessor, was wearing the silver armor Dashuang, which was one of the 3 divine armors. It's a pity that in the battle of ascending to the sky where the Taoists and gods fell countless, the gatekeeper Zheng Dafeng, who was unwilling to let go of the road, was finally killed by someone who was in the door when the situation was gone. The great frost armor was shattered and left in the world. Like the hairpin of the first Taoist priest in the world, it will end in the same way. Later, the first ancestors of military strategists evolved based on these 3 armors and avenues, and derived the 3 militants xuanhuan of later generations, creating another batch of second-class forgeries, which are the later Jinghuijia, Jinwujia, and Shenren. Cheng Lujia's pioneering work is the ancestor of the 3 strategist treasures. There are 2 sets of ancestor warp and weft armor, which are cast from warp and weft respectively, and are worn by a gash trainer. The former is like receiving the protection of an infinite world similar to Buddhism. Even if you stand side by side with someone, you will stand in front of you. Wherever it is, whether it is flying swords or spells, it is like a headless fly, looking for an enemy, close at hand and far away in the sky, in vain. The latter is slightly inferior in rank, but equally incomparably mysterious. Qi practitioners can accumulate drops of aura of their own Taoism and pour them into it. Even if drops of aura are as much as the sands of the Ganges, they still can't fill that bottomless pit. Then the toughness of a piece of treasure is naturally beyond ordinary people's imagination. As for the Qi practitioners in the world, there is a bottleneck in the original accumulation of aura in the human world, and in different realms, there is a bottleneck in different realms. It is like a blessed land that ranks among the top ranks. One day the aura of the world will overflow. It is conceivable that if there is a monk who is lucky enough to win this treasure for thousands of years or even 10,000 years, even if it is not a 14th level monk, but just an ascendant, he only needs to wear this treasure. Standing still, you can let an ascending realm swordsman chop for a long time. Xiao Mo just happened to know the whereabouts of the Weir armor. Just like himself, the owner of this precious armor had slept for thousands of years in a hidden place under the wild world. The problem is that this old guy is still a female cultivator, and also a sword cultivator, and she was known for her killing power thousands of years ago. Xiao Mo smiled and said, Qing Tong, I'm very curious, who gives you the confidence and courage that can make you so defiant? It stands to reason that Qing Tong has been cultivating the Tao for thousands of years in the Haoran world, and he doesn't need to be like himself. He pays attention to a visitor who is a guest. He should be familiar with the rules and taboos of the mountain. Xiao Mo had no expression on his face and slowly said, My son, as the last master of the summer palace of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, the last hermit appointed by Qin Qing, you have a lot of credit, you monks at the top of the mountain, you know everything. Even if it only talks about hard work, he can stand alone and defend half of the city. What's more, the son is still the leader of the Tuoyue mountain battle. Just talk about the accompanying sword repair, whether it is Qi Tingji criminal officer Haosu Lu Ji or by Yujing's 3 heads taught Lu Qin, if they were to travel here, would you dare to see? Can you not see? Even if you leave the hidden official status aside, the son is still a close disciple of Wensheng's lineage, a student of Mr. Wensheng, Cui Yang, right and left, Lu 16, Qi Jingchun and their younger brothers. The son is still the lord of the Luapa mountain, the master of a sect in the world, and now he wants to establish the next sect. Only after the beginning of the spring festival, the son will become the grand ancestor in the eyes of the future monks of Mount Xiandu. Others don't know the inside story. From the perception of your youth, would you not know that it will be a veritable kendo sect? It is a kendo sect that has not existed in thousands of years since the Bidong sword sect in the middle of the continent of Tonghua was destroyed. Therefore this move will create a new face for Tonghua, add vitality to the transportation of mountains and rivers in the original stagnant pool, and the sun and his student Chui Dongshan are the ones who dig the canal of the flowing water at the source. In addition, the sun is also the spiritual leader of a certain Taoist in this life, and both parties will be fellow climbers who climb together. This person is now named Nian Jing with the word xianhui. The sun is also the Taoist companion of Ning Yao, the first person in the colorful world. It's just that these two personal matters, both big and small, Xiaomo didn't talk about it on the table. If you are a stunned young man who doesn't know anything about the world, and doesn't care about these identities of the sun, then when Xing used the damage of his own avenue as the price to protect the mountains and rivers of the 3 continents. Completely shattered, among them is Tonghua. What's more, if it weren't for Cui Yang from Ao Pingzhou, Qi Jingchun, his junior, and Lu 16 who had returned to Haoran, and 3 direct disciples of Wensheng's lineage, they would shoot one after another, and they would be close to Wenhai in private, right here in Tonghua. There was an undercurrent surging fight. Well, the survival of this demon building in the town will probably be a big question mark. Qing Tong is closely related to the Confucian Temple. Even if he betrays the Confucian Temple and seeks refuge in Wenhai Zhoumi, at least it needs to cut off the close connection between Qing Tong and a male town building. Even if Zhoumi has the means to reach the sky, it can help you break this relationship. It is estimated that at least 1 or 2 places will fall lingering, then when the situation of the 2 worlds is reversed, the old throne big demons such as Yuan Shou and Fei Fei can escape back to the barren world, and the Qing Tong who has a great road to Tonghua unless Zhoumi took him to the sky with him, he would only end up like the big demon Yangji who was detained in the realm of Lao Junlu, becoming a prisoner of the Confucian Temple. What's more, with the temper of the most sacred master, if Qing Tong dared to act like this, even if Zhoumi was willing to save Qing Tong to the sky and leave, I am afraid he would only be knocked down in the world. In addition, Qin Pinggan's brothers and sisters had also been in Tonghua, as a member of the Great Wall of Jianqi, personally sheltering a gateway to a new world, helping Tonghua preserve a vitality. When the door is open next time, the many refugees who have fled so mightily in wuxialover, regardless of whether they are willing to return to their hometown, can give back to Tonghua's luck to a certain extent. Therefore, when Sheng's lineage, whether it is an old scholar of his husband for of Qinping's brothers or Qinping's himself Yutong Yezhou in this town's demon building or in a phoenix tree, it is all kind of grace. Man of Qin Pinggan and Shindu Mountain are in Tonghua. To make up for the lack of land, mountains and rivers, Qing Tong is a great thing to lie down and enjoy the blessing. This avenue benefit is destined to be a steady stream of accounts, which is more relaxed and comfortable than the profitable rent collector and landlord's wife. Qin Pinggan chose to locate his next sect in Tonghua, especially Qingping Jianzong is still a kendo sect. This means that certain kendo chi luck involved in the hermit of the Great Wall of Jianqi will be followed by Qin Pinggan. Bringing Tonghua instead of gifting it to the hometown of Beipingzu, those kendo luck will take root here, through Shindu Mountain and Qingping Jianzong, and future sword repairs who will become Shindu Mountain genealogical monks, such as Sifang duckweed gathers on a mountain, and then disperses like dandelions. As time goes by, flowers will bloom and bear fruit everywhere. Xiaomo stopped talking, just shook his head. The old friend Bixiao cave master has already left Tonghua. As the Taoist temple of the East China Sea, they all moved away and went to the Qingming world. This means that the old master is almost unlikely to return in the short term. Old haunt. The Confucian Temple seems to have also lifted the restrictions on the Jinyao Tower, which is equivalent to allowing Qing Tong to regain his freedom. Step back and say, this time the sun brought himself here. Even if the 2 sides met, the price was not agreed, the business can be negotiated, but in the end it is not the righteousness of the business. Just go to the town demon tower a few more times, and it will still be like today and the younger generation will be respected. Therefore, it is public for private and sentimental for reason. Today this young fellow should meet Qin Pinggan who has multiple identities. Fundamentally, in short, Qing Tong chose to thank the guests behind closed doors with the principle of, I want all the benefits, don't try to find me. Don't even want to meet Qin Pinggan's side, don't talk about it. This kind of behavior is tantamount to the fact that the real fire dragon is a guest of the Lu family in Aiezhou. He walked to the gate of the mountain and said that he had a business relationship, and then Lu Jubao did not show up. After that, even if I had to open the door to welcome guests, I still didn't pay attention to things. Just like the real fire dragon wants to see Lu Jubao in the family ancestral hall, he has to pass. There are 12 picture scrolls, 12 phantom worlds, and many temptations in the same series of things about riding a donkey and looking for a donkey. They all work on Jinping's Taoism, work the human heart, dig into the roots in the heart and in the monk's mountain. Visiting the dojo is better than exploring the quiet. It is already equivalent to a way of cultivating Taoism, it is a questioning. This is the questioning fist between sword repairs, the questioning fist between pure swordsmen. If another metaphor is to be used, Qin Qing will leave the Great Wall of Jianghu to visit the Qin to Confucian Temple. You have to pass a layer of poems and poems. Xiao Mo turned his head and asked, Qing Tong, I will ask you one last sentence, is there anything unspeakable? After asking the question, Xiao Mo waited for the following paragraphs. Qing Tong hesitated several times, but in the end he remained silent. Xiao Mo nodded and said, if you don't speak you will assume that you don't have it by default. In Xiao Mo's view this is a typical shamelessness. I've been holding you back for a long time. The old coachman who was in the big city of Lijiang before was just the chief officer of the ancient Leibu Jade prison. Besides, those are old grievances of stale sesame seeds and rotten grains, not to mention that the matter is not too big, it has been turned over a long time ago, and it is not Xiao Mo's style to turn old accounts. As for the ghost Yen Eugene next to Zhong Kue, it was more like a joke and a joke. Xiao Mo put the hiking stick in his sleeve. Qing Tongyin panicked immediately, and if he was not that dumb, he hurriedly said, hold on. It's just that Xiao Mo didn't talk to the young people anymore. In addition, Qing Tong couldn't stop Xiao Mo's ending the sword. It's like two small worlds separated by a mirror. The border between the world and the world is like a piece of cloth covering everything in the world. As a result, it was picked up by people's fingers and finally tore a hole. It looked like a silkworm cocoon with a sword repaired out of the cocoon. In the distance, Qin Pingan, who was keenly aware of the signs of the vision for the first time, turned his head and looked at Xiao Mo's side. The first time I met Xiao Mo was in that round of bright moon and bright colors. It was an old man with a domineering face and a sharp sword. When the two sides meet again, it will be the appearance of the gentle youth. But at this time Xiao Mo, as his name suggests, is really unfamiliar. I don't see the real body, I only see the Dhamma. A large robe, a faintly visible face, white jade, the whole body is crystal clear, pure as glass, without any bones, veins or flesh and blood. The snow-white hair is extremely long, ethereal and ethereal. With a sword in hand, the weather is majestic and the sword intent is awe-inspiring, showing a posture of flying with the sword. Probably this is the pinnacle posture of Xiao Mo's consummation? Come to the world above the mirror. The real body of the sycamore tree is here. Xiao Mo hasn't really handed out a sword yet, and his sword aura has filled the world. In the whole world, in an instant countless pillars of sword chi appeared, suddenly appearing and wantonly running through the world. A poor world, like a carefully woven and patched kit, is pierced by hundreds of sharp ice cones at the same time. A vast world, cut by tens of thousands of sword lights, has become fragmented. The most terrifying thing is that the amount of sword lights with no rules at all angles is still superimposed crazy, so that the old sword energy is condensed. The beam of light was easily shattered by the brand new sword light in a blink of an eye. According to the level of their respective realms and the strength of their spiritual consciousness, the cultivators of the 5 realms on Tonggishao showed varying degrees of Dao Xian trembling, and they were vaguely aware of something wrong. The 3 Confucian sages who were responsible for sitting in the sky of Tonggishao looked up and smiled. They saw the sky above the middle of Tonggishao as if a ball of light appeared, but somehow it was covered with spikes and the sword was strong. The old master who was closest to the ball of light chuckled softly, "A good town monster building, how can it become a hedgehog? This kind of private grievances between the monks, what are the obstacles? Besides, if the old man doesn't run to pull the side frame, he will save the face of this young fellow. The war has ended for so many years, because the most sage master, rites and sub-sages for some reason didn't say anything. This demon building in the town also pretended to be deaf and dumb, like a miser who held his money bag tight. He is a master who refuses to spend the slightest bit, but just looks on the wall. So to clean up a mess of broken mountains and rivers in Tonggishao, it can only be the mountain masters, gentlemen and wise men of the 3 academies, running around and breaking their legs. Because it is not allowed to participate in the specific affairs of the human world, it was an iron rule that the Li Sheng personally formulated for these sages who were sitting in the sky to accompany them in the early years, so the 3 of them can only be worried, and they can't talk to the male town building. A complaint. In fact, it's not pleasing to the eye for several years. Cannot demand others to be sages. The old master who once praised the young hermit's good demeanor, shook his sleeves and covered up the vision of heaven and earth. Where is the responsibility? Who can pick my thorn? A Confucian temple-approved xianxia building, and the Confucian scholars of Wensheng's line belonged to their family members who kept the door behind and made trouble. The new battlefield in heaven and earth, the Qingtongyin god, disappeared together with the burly old man who was the outer body of the yang god, and returned to his true body. After all, he was going to confront an ascending realm sword repairman. How could Qingtong dare to take it lightly? The real body of the sycamore tree changed into a slender figure, with alternating light and dark and a fuzzy face. He wore a crown of hibiscus on his head, a new armor, a golden robe and a pair of emerald green feet. Shoes, a series of simple jade plaques hanging from the waist, and bright red arm studs on the arms. In short, they can be worn and they all come in handy. A variety of mountain magic weapons, fancy decorations. At the same time, this long-lived ascended realm great monk did not wait to die, stepping on a battle, pinching his hands with both hands, and the clone bloomed like a flower bud. More than 1,000 incarnations of Qingtong, each exhibiting their magical powers, have sacrificed different magic weapons, and used different attacking techniques and defensive magical powers. A lot of skills don't overwhelm you. Just talk about the many kinds of magic techniques, the variety of different kinds, and don't talk about the mystery of Taoism and the height of cultivation base. It is estimated that Qingtong will be able to rank among the top 10 with only today's hand. Of these Qingtong clones, more than 100 of them are responsible for the temporary formation, creating a landscape formation, and the remaining more talisman clones, in order to block the endless sword light, they will not hesitate to burn with jade. And Qingtong, the ascended realm monk who claims to have a few hands of big charms, the big charms at the bottom of the box, are sacrificed together, and they fit the 5 elements avenue, which can be called the ultimate attainments of the talisman. A fire talisman was sacrificed, and a 1,000-meter-high fire spirit appeared, with thousands of flames intertwined all over his body, smashing the sword lights that were constantly approaching the landscape. There is another water talisman, and the talisman is connected and swept out continuously like the river, which is made up of tens of thousands of talisman intertwined and overlapped, sparkling, and finally converges to reveal a 1,000-mile-long cyan carp, with each piece on the body. The scales of the fish are as big as a courtyard and they are all auras. The 3 mountains and 5 sacred talismans, which were piled into mountains by soil, suddenly smashed into the ground. 5 ancient large sacred mountains took roots on the ground. The 3 mountains formed horns with each other, and there were 5 ancient sacred mountains surrounding the 3 mountains. Helped the landscape formation outside to stabilize the position. Behind Qingtongzin's body, a wooden talisman with scattered light and wisps of light, and then piled up a frame that seems to be the most delicate and dense wooden puppet in the world. But Xiaomo faced these messy methods. There is only one sword. A dazzling sword light, like a fish wagging its tail, headed towards the formation and the true body of Qingtong. Wherever the sword light arrives, it destroys the dead. Around Jianghu, there appeared a passage similar to the realm of the emptiness outside the sky. Even the countless inclined beams of light condensed from his own sword qi, just because of blocking the way, all collapsed and then all turned into nothingness. This is the true killing power of an ascendant pinnacle sword repairer. Elsewhere in the world, more than a dozen delicate springs that resemble water splashing and rippling are emerging at the same time. The fountain of those water sources is located. The ding-dong sounded like a sound of heaven. The rivers and rivers in the world are blazing. No matter how aggressive the water is when entering the sea, the water is majestic, and there are often only a few tiny springs at the source of the water veins. These seemingly inconspicuous existences, the subtlety of the sword aura, seem to be completely negligible, but they are like the beginning of Xiaomo's swordsmanship. In your youthful home, hide. Where can you hide? Run out of a town demon building. Where can your Qingtong run? A large array of mountains and rivers fell apart in a blink of an eye, and the sound of breaking and breaking shaking the earth. Qingtong exhausted all the big charms, and was able to dispel the terrifying sword light that seemed to be in the realm of no one. Thousands of years ago, I knew that this famous sword repairer had a high level of swordsmanship, but Qingtong still couldn't imagine that it would be so high. But isn't it said that its swordsmanship is not known for its killing power? Is it just because it is both offensive and defensive that it is extremely difficult to entangle? Didn't it mean that its swordsmanship at the time was not ranked among the top 5 swordsmen in the world? Suddenly, Qingtong's eyes widened, and he saw a face that became clearer and clearer. This ancient monster sword repairman, with a smiling face getting closer and closer, just swiped a sword in his hand. A long arc was drawn between the whole world and the earth, straight to Qing Tong's head. The guy who has now changed his name to Xiaoma seems to be talking. Hello, fellow young fellow. Goodbye, Wei source. Fate hangs by a thread. Qing sympathizes in a hurry, but it is not considered to be awaiting death, and suddenly shouted, Qin Pingan. The holy master has something to tell. That scarlet robe was breaking through the gap between the world and the earth, and Xiaoma, crossing the small world, like an ancient who climbed up in the sky, stepped up the stairs and slowly appeared. With sleeves in both hands, double knives folded at the waist, a night-walking sword that swept the sky by itself was followed by his side. But Qing Tong was like falling into an ice cave in an instant, and Xiaomo, who was holding a sword close to him, crossed one by one, and Qing Tong, who was standing on the spot, had his head cut off by the arc of sword light. A head was thrown high. Maybe it was Qin Pingan too late to stop Xiaomo. Maybe because of his heartfelt words, Xiaomo was too late to take the sword. It may be that Xiaomo heard his heart, but the ancient monster sword repairer was full of anger, unwilling to stop the sword. More likely, Qin Pingan did not say anything because he did not want to speak at all. Too lazy to speak. Who knows? The long sword formed by the condensed sword intent in Xiaomo's hand dissipated on the spot. He switched to holding the sword and looked around and smiled slightly. At any rate, he was an ascending cultivator. How could he easily be killed on the spot so easily? There is still some distance. But no matter what, it's easier than trying to kill Yangji back then. Yangji's ascension realm is even more peaked, and her physique is inherently tough. Moreover, in the ancient world the territory is vast, plus the road of cultivation of Yangji, blessed by nature, is responsible for part of the road and water transport, so every time the water borders he flees fast, and the speed of escape is better than Jianghu. This youth is in a prison situation. That head, at a speed visible to the naked eye, rotted like a piece of dead wood, and then turned into ashes and floated between the heavens and the earth. Behind Xiaomo, where Qing Tongshan's body was, the treasure armor fell to the ground clanging, the sound was clear, and the robe fell to the ground, limp on top of the treasure armor. Used a kind of escape method similar to the magical power of cicadas. A big tree hurts only the branches and leaves, not the main trunk. Of course, the loss of Qing Tong's avenue is inevitable. There was an angry voice resounding like thunder in all directions. Don't take an inch. Here is the Jinyao Tower, one of the 9 majestic towns in the world. Your Xiaoma happens to be a monster from the wild world. Xiaomo was smiling brightly, and for a moment he couldn't see the law and followed a clue to kill him. A fascinating image of immortality, and there is no trace of the reed flowers on the bright moon. After a while, an incomparably dark round moon hung from the horizon. Qing Tong was forced to show up and had to use a life-saving magical power at the bottom of the box, the moon phase. In comparison, Xiaomo's image can only be regarded as mustard seed to the mouth of the well. However, near the bright moon, a very subtle light first shines, and then spreads into a line instantly, and finally the long line of sword light, like a huge dragon flying into the sky, it winds and winds over a bright moon. This is Xiaomo's own swordsmanship after a pair of sun and moon orbits in the past and swallowed one round of the moon quietly on the road. It's just that compared to the ancient Taoist fellow who owns the wuxia, Xiaomo believes that he is still a lot worse than the veritable eclipse Taoism. At that time, they had to wake up from their deep sleep one after another by Baize's edict. One of them was an ancient existence because the 10,000 years Taoist temple, or the land of healing, was in the wild world. In the middle of the day, therefore, this sister-in-law, who is also a sword repairer, and Xiaoma, a neighbor in the sky, who is in the bright moon and bright color, spoke a few words casually with his unique magical powers. In fact, the other party also said that now he has taken a pseudonym for himself. Thanks for the dog. Previously, Xiaomo and Qin Pingan mentioned their ancient existence, cultivation base and combat power. Xiaomo, who was the dead man, was frank, saying that he was neither the one with the most killing power nor the one with the strongest defense, but Xiaomo can be sure of one thing, his offense and defense are in the top 3. Because Xiaomo had not dealt with Qin Pingan for a long time, and because of Jianxia's disposition, he still had reservations at that time. He didn't say much about the inside story. Not 4 but only 3 because that, thanks to the dog, is also a peak powerhouse with both offensive and defensive capabilities. As for Xiaomo and this fellow Taoist whose alias is now Xiego, there is another long story of grievances and grievances. This is probably one of the reasons why Xiaomo is reluctant to tell more about the truth. Qin Pingan's shoulders sank, and his stature became more and more rickety. It was not Qing Tong who once again moved out of the identity of the master of the town's demon building. After a while, sword light still lit up suddenly and suddenly disappeared. Qingtong finally showed his true face for the first time, embarrassed, blood-stained, bruised, crisscrossed, with no fewer than a dozen wounds, bare bones and horrible. Young looks, handsome, indistinguishable from male and female. It's just that Qingtong no longer has the grace of the great monk on the top of the mountain, and he looks a little anxious, standing not far from Chen Pingan, as if only in this way can he breathe a little. Qingtong's choice is right. As expected, Xiaomo did not continue to hand the sword. The hand holding the sword walked around behind him to show his sincerity. Let you rest for a while beside my son. Chen Pingan looked strange for a while after seeing Qingtong's face. According to the secret archives of the Summer Palace, the ancient saying goes that the male phoenix tree is female, the phoenix tree is the same elder and the same age and the same life and death. And Lu Tai, who was born in the Lu family of the yin and yang family in China, is the body of a yin and yang fish that has been rare in thousands of years. Back then, Lu Tai accompanied Chen Pingan to travel to Tonggishao. A gas trainer is naturally afraid of heights. Zhou Zi and Jianshu Pei Min are both Lu Tai's preaching teachers. After Lu Tai separated from himself, would he have been brought here by Zhou Zi? Chen Pingan did not ask Qingtong about this. It doesn't matter whether it is Lu Tai or Jianxiu Lu Kai, I believe there will be a reunion day or a time to meet at the end of the next year. Xiaomo raised his chin towards Na Qingtong, indicating that you can leave here. Qingtong gritted his teeth and left. By the time he appeared for the second time, Xiaomo had cut off the same arm by Qing, but with a sway of his shoulder, Qingtong gave birth to another arm. Chen Pingan smiled and said, I haven't figured out the wording yet? Are you entangled at the moment? Am not sure I fooled me, and am not bold enough to pretend the will of the Holy Master? It's just not nonsense but also Xiama. Chasing and slashing even if you can't die for a while, but the conversion is a real loss of a sword for decades and hundreds of years. Let alone a stick of incense in 3/4 of an hour, I am afraid that it only takes 1/4 of an hour, and it is about to fall. Qingtong raised the back of his hand and wiped the blood from the corners of his mouth. You are not afraid that I will destroy the town's demon building first, and then run to find the sage who is sitting in the sky to save my life? Chen Pingan put out a hand from his sleeve and raised it high. Go ahead. Qingtong gritted his teeth and said, although the Most Holy Master never asked me to give you a message, the Most Holy Master came here after all. It is true and true to send me a message. I hope I can practice hard if you dare to destroy one. Town Demon Tower, indulge an ascending realm swordsman who came from a wild world and ruined my avenue. Chen Pingan put his hand away and nodded. When I look back, I will go to the Confucian temple where I am free to plead guilty. Well, I can find my husband first and then the holy saint. Qingtong's face was uncertain. Don't you Qingtong like to lie down and enjoy happiness? There is no problem at all. Earlier, while Xiaomo Jingguang broke the restriction of heaven and earth, Chen Pingan actually used a bird in a cage and Jing Zhongyue to send a letter to the old master with a flying sword. With that saint sage there is a gentleman's appointment. Ask him for help. Be sure to conceal from your husband and send a letter to Li Sheng. I implore the saint of ceremony to move half of the great wall of sword qi. As for the conversion of merits, it is nothing more than a clear account. The saints of rites and the Confucian temple will just follow the rules. On Mr. Xiping's side, the book of merits about the name Chen Pingan should be cancelled as much as possible. But the 14 realms of your youth, don't even think about it for the rest of your life. It's ridiculous that Chen Pingan has been thinking about the 14th level cultivators' brazen murder after the ancestors of the 3 sects spread the way, or the secret layout of the cultivators against the peak cultivators of the ascension stage. I never thought that under the circumstances, I became the first one to prevent others from entering the 14th level. So what is the difference between your Qingtong's next stay in Tonggishao, 100 years, 1,000 years or 10,000 years? It's just this kind of thing. It's over, there is no need to speak. Lest it seems to be threatening someone. Although the price is a bit high, the gain is also not small. One continent, mountains and rivers, will soon be able to secure good luck. And after sowing it will be much smoother. If there is harmony between people, there will be good land and there will be time. Many things that originally required Qingtong can do it on their own. The only trouble, it is estimated that the husband will be irritated by himself when he learns of this. Do not care. Damn it. Sure enough, the eldest sword immortal was right, cultivation practice cannot always be so rigid. In every century, there is always something to be done that doesn't need to be reasonable at all. Suddenly, Qingtong's expression was slightly surprised, and he was reluctant to open a ban on mountains and rivers like opening a door. Qin Pinyin was even more surprised because the flying sword that had left this world before passed away in a flash and came straight to him. Qin Pinyin had to put the sword light in his sleeve. Then Qing Tong began to jump and scolded, "Qin Pinyin, you are a lunatic. Bastard, you are really obsessed with your heart and lost your heart. When you were a child, your mind was caught by the door panel. If you are doing such a detrimental activity, you have to do it so smoothly. For Lao Tzu, if you really move the half of the Great Wall of Sword Qi here, do you know the consequences? As long as the mountains and rivers of Tonggishao are broken for one day, you will not be able to break through the border for the next day. Don't even think about it." Qin Pinyin frowned slightly, not because of Qing Tong's innocuous curses, but not knowing the purpose of the old master's move. The two parties had clearly finalized the deal. In Qing Tong's heart, it seemed that he had received a scolding, and the wording was definitely not tactful. Therefore, Qing Tong became sick and stared at the bright red robe, sighed and closed the door first. Then hesitated and took out 2 remaining talismans from his sleeve, one talisman, just an ordinary yellow seal material, and the other a rare golden talisman. Qin Pinyin instantly narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "Xiao Mo, if you need to do something, you can ignore the consequences." Xiao Mo, who had originally planned to restore his true body, nodded and continued to maintain his posture, and for the first time became a sword in both hands. Qing Tong said in his heart, "You have such a good memory, you must still remember these 2 old charms." Qin Pinyin was expressionless. "Of course I remember. One is a Yin Qi guide talisman that he had in Feiying Castle back then, in accordance with Lu Tai's instructions, reversed the painting of the Yang Qi and picked the lamp talisman. On the other hand, the golden talisman, the talisman paper was given to Lu Tai by Qin Pinyin, and Lu Tai finally drew a fairy talisman to the underworld." Qing Tong continued to say to Qin Pinyin with his heartfelt voice, "You're right, Zhou Zi did bring the landing platform to find me back then. In addition to leaving me an unlucky saying, Zhou Zi also gave me these 2 remaining talismans. I think Zhou Zi is telling a joke, saying that he might be able to help me through the disaster in the future." Qin Pinyin nodded and said, "It's just a joke, you are really right if you don't take it seriously." In fact, Qing Tong was already mentally prepared to be a dead horse doctor. If you don't want a demon building in the town, you should show Qin Pinyin and that Xiaoma a little bit of color. The big deal ended up going to the Confucian temple and each played 50 boards. Qing Tong hesitated for a moment and said a trivial matter, "Zhou Zi also brought a group of feminine children with him at the time, saying that it was for me to show some merit, he was useful." Qin Pinyin asked, "What about then?" Qing Tong said helplessly, "It's just a little merit, it's Zhou Zi's request, of course I did." It was the first time that Xiao Mo saw his son, showing a hesitant look. "Many years ago I traveled with the land platform. During the collapse of the Flying Eagle Fort, there was an alley outside the door, a broken road and a wall full of corpses. At that time, Qin Pinyin had not lent the brush called Xiao Shuezhu to Zhong Kuei. At that time, a talisman painting might not be regarded as entering the room. In the end, Qin Pinyin didn't say a word, reached out his hand to hold the Yeo sword, turned and left, turned his head and said with Na Qing Tong, "Don't let me see you in the future." Qing Tong's expression was complicated and he was shocked. This guy really just left? Xiao Mo was too lazy to think about why the son would change his original intention. The son is always right when he does things. Qing Tong hesitated for a moment and shouted, "Qin Pinyin, you are not curious why I am so unkind?" In the last 4 words, Qing Tong bit his head and said awkwardly. Qin Pinyin, with his back to Qing Tong, just looked up at the sky and said in a deep voice, "Open the door quickly, there is no need to see you off." "You're damn, you have the same mind." When I turned his head I was reuniting, really looking for a chop. Qing Tong continued, "I naturally have a reason." Qin Pinyin turned his head and smiled, "Do you like extrajunction so much?" Qing Tong was horrified by being looked at. He was silent for a moment. He had to stubbornly and tentatively said, "A few rehearsal, a few small talks? In case you have a chance to get along with each other, you can't talk about cooperation." For one thing, I was worried that the 2 sides misunderstood too deeply and would be held hostage. In fact, Qing Tong didn't think about any chance to fall in love, but if this guy had a brain and he left this town demon building, he would continue to discuss with the Confucian temple master about relocating half of the city. What should be done? Then what if the little master agreed again? In addition, Qing Tong is unwilling to do something and wants to find a place in certain things. As for the fight, it's a matter of fact. The situation is overwhelming and he is full of suffering. Today there are 2 fights, especially the latter. It's a bit of a hold and now I still have lingering fears. If you can, it doesn't matter whether you Qin Pingan sees me or not. In short, don't let me see the little mo next to you again. Qin Pingan thought for a while, smiled and nodded. You can do whatever you want. Shaking his sleeves, he sat down cross-legged, with the horizontal sword on his knees. In front of Qing Tong, Qin Pingan retwisted a white horse gap talisman from his sleeve and hovered beside him for timekeeping. Qing Tong's eyelids trembled slightly. Should he say that this guy is cautious, or should he not give himself any face? Seeing that Xiao Mo followed his seat, Qing Tong hesitated for a moment, and chose to sit opposite them. Qin Pingan's first words seemed murderous. Tong Yezhou Tong Yezong Du Mao's Wudong Cave Sky you gave it? Qing Tong is obviously smarter. If you lose, you don't lose and you don't have a good air. The parasol umbrella you brought out of the Uwafudi, apart from being able to isolate the heavens, is still a quarter of the Uwafudi, tracing its origins. It's not an object that left from my side. What's the point of turning over this old account? Qin Pingan smiled and said, I don't mean to turn over the old accounts. Du Mao's story has already been turned over. Qing Tong glanced at Xiao Mo subconsciously. Xiao Mo smiled and said, don't use your own brain to figure out my son's mind. Indus twigs have been known as phoenix sticks since ancient times. The lotus root flower cave sky divided into 4, Qin Pingan got the oil paper umbrella presented by the old master, and the umbrella bone is the phoenix tree branch. Since ancient times, the branches and leaves of the phoenix tree are afraid of strong winds and the roots of the trees are waterlogged. The young sword repairman in front of him had a faint qi in his body. From the side of Aunt Feng's stinky lady, it was contaminated with the atmosphere of the Great Road. In addition, Qin Pingan is on the road of cultivation less than half 100 years old, and the road is water-free, and it is definitely not the kind of qi practitioner that is suitable for the practice of water law. If you say that the Aunt of Feng Auntie's grand atmosphere, it's still pretty shallow. So in the dark, a certain Dao gift from the reincarnation of an ancient rain master, although Qin Pingan did not accept it in its entirety for Qing Tong, it was an abhorrent and extremely jealous Dao victory. In addition, Qin Pingan is also a sword repairman, especially he has been in the Great Wall of Jianghu for so many years. Back then he also carried Qin Kingda's sword spirit on his back. Today Qin Pingan carries the real name of the Yaozu, and of course it is in opposition to the natural road of the Zhenyaolu. With so many reasons added together, how can Qing Tong get close to this person? Listening to Qing Tong's complaint, Qin Pingan nodded, squinted and said with a smile, the words are reasonable and there is excuse. These reasons are all reasons. But neither is the real reason. At this moment, in Qing Tong's eyes, the person in front of him has no sincerity in his words. Let Qing Tong add an additional reason not to like this person. Picture. So alike. The young sword immortal with an unpredictable temperament in front of him is just like the certain Dao Chang son from the Qingming world. The latter once wandered here and deliberately concealed his identity as the Xuandu Taoist temple. There was a misunderstanding that was entirely intended by the other party. After a fight, the other party said that the poor Dao is as open-minded as the sea, the breath is as high as a mountain, and there are some misunderstandings. I've saved the abdomen of a gentleman with the heart of a villain. If the fellow Taoists are so careful, don't blame the poor Dao for doing things without being generous. Before Sun Daochang left, he didn't say anything directly. The old Taoists just expressed their feelings, chanting poems and making fuss. In the bright moon night, choose a good day and transplant a biwu tree in my Taoist courtyard. The bark is green as green, the leaves are lacking like flowers, and the flowers are beautiful and beautiful. Falling leaves in winter, for the joy of melting in the sun, shade in summer and autumn, can cover the suffering of the flames and the joy is endless. A bullheader of the sword immortal of the Qingming world, the fifth person in the world who can't move, the old master of the world, how could he just choose a slender branch? I chopped off an arm. Fortunately, there was still the Taoist pure son who was there, helping to ease his cheeks, and it was considered that Qing Tong avoided a natural and man-made disaster. Qing Tong said in his own heart again, Zozi left here that year and told me that I will examine someone's Dao Xan in the future. As for the result, I don't have to tell him what I think. As for who someone is, just say that I will know it at first sight. Someone? Qin Pingan doubted. I was carrying that sword spirit long at the time, so you didn't keep staring at me? Isn't it obvious? Qing Tong said helplessly, believe it or not, in my eyes you didn't have that land around you back then, and even many of the sights I thought I saw were a series of illusions that Zhou Zi deliberately let me see. A real blindness. As for how Zhou Zi did it, I don't know. It was after seeing you this time that I noticed something was wrong. Taking advantage of your previous walk in those illusion scrolls, I immediately proceeded. After a lot of deductions and pushing back, I got this terrible truth. Qin Pingan looked dubious. However, Qing Tong's reason, whether true or false, is barely an excuse to pass by. Let Xiaomo return to his real body. Qing Tong was relieved, waved his sleeves and picked 12 leaves from the golden leaves on the ground. Hovering in front of you, put your fingers together, gently touched one of the fallen leaves, swiped forward and floated towards Qin Pingan. Every fallen leaf is a picture of horse riding similar to the long river of time. Each has its key points. Play chess. Luyin Huangliang is a dream. In the severe drought, officials prayed for rain. The county guard governs the water with 2 wicks. The warlord does not want to strike halfway, benevolence and righteousness. Marriage of gifted scholars and beautiful ladies, old monk, little novice monk. The old woman riding a horse, the Midyuan festival, there is a bright and different way. The gods of the same place, the mountain alliance swears each other. A secret place in the flower country with heavy powdered air. As a monarch, a man of Taoism, turn back the clock. Buy cakes. Qing Tong looked serious, slightly nostalgic and slowly said, in fact there are only a handful of winners in the past. Heaven and earth gain one and each is peaceful. God gains one spirit which is a god. The valley gains a fullness and all things live by one. The long river of time and the spiritual energy between the heaven and the earth used by the Qi practitioners are all from the gods. Born from dead corpses. The magical powers of the world are like a big tree reflected in the water, each with its branches and veins. It is the Taoist vein for later generations. Every time it blossoms and bears fruit, it is a man of Taoism. Upon hearing this, Xiaomo chuckled. You're boasting about selling melons here. Really capable, why can't I even take a few swords? Besides, he didn't use any natal flying sword. Qing Tong didn't fight in anger and said angrily, this metaphor is not what I said. Xiaomo stretched out his hand and patted the green bamboo stick lying on his knees horizontally, indicating that the other party should not speak so loudly. He was timid and could not stand fright. Qin Pingan asked, who do you mean by few countable? Qing Tong said, of course it is the 10 lords of the world in the ancient years. Qin Pingan looked calm. But it was actually the first time Qin Pingan heard about this. There is no record in the Summer Palace, and there is no Confucian temple. No one mentions it, his husband, student Cui Dongshan, together with Xiaoma the old sword fairy and seniors. This matter. It is a pity that Qing Tong only mentioned part of the list. It turns out that in those ancient years, before the battle between water and fire and the battle of ascending to the sky, there were 10 giants in the world. Without exception, sanctify as God. 10 monks of different backgrounds have no ranks among them. Among them are the ancestors of the 3 teachings. The first ancestor of the military. The first monk in the world. There is also a well-deserved leader of kendo in the world. Sword training has the best aptitude, the fastest cultivation breakthrough, the largest number of flying swords and the highest rank. The strength of these existences is actually clear only by looking at the alternatives. The number of candidates is small, only 4 people in total. They are Jianxiu Qin Qingdu Little Master by Zhe, and Mr. Sanshan Jiuho who created the talisman. When Qing Tong talked about Qin Qingdu, he couldn't help but glance at the ghost-looking young man opposite. The relationship between Qin Qing and the leader of Jianxiu, both of whom were both Jianxiu at the beginning, is actually a bit similar to the dispute between Qin Pingan and Chao Xiai on the road of martial arts today. The former is always chasing after the latter. In the end, the highest kendo player in the world was Qin Qingdu, the alternate for latecomers. Qing Tong continued, in the ancient times the battle between water and fire hurt the heaven and the earth, causing the Tianzhu to be broken and the earth to be destroyed. For all the beings at that time, of course it was a disaster, but at the same time, it was a disaster for all the spiritual beings who escaped by chance, especially the monks. Qing Tong stopped talking and seemed to think of an image metaphor. Qin Pingan then said, if it's too late, it's a great opportunity. Just like the burning and turning of the crops of later generations, it is full of aura, like changing from a barren land to a fertile land. Qing Tong nodded, the way of heaven is tilted, and the movement rules of the sun, moon and stars are becoming more and more evident. The uneven terrain, the world is full of water and dust, are all opportunities for the survivors to cultivate the way. The last time Zhou Zi gave Qing Tong the admonishment, it was, the land is sinking to the southeast, and the sky is tilting to the northwest. Qing Tong sighed, after this, the Taoist scholars who are successful in the arts will occupy their own land. After brewing the wording again after a while, Qing Tong finally gave a courageous statement for these people who proclaimed the Tao in the ancient years. I am the host. The way of heaven is more than damages and makes up for the deficiencies. Humanity is more than deficiencies. So Tao ancestors have a word who can do more to serve the world. There is only Tao. Nowadays, the sects and immortals on the mountain, no matter how big or small the sect is, there is an enshrined post in the ancestor hall. This is where the root of the worship of this identity is only, and it means doing worship to respect the heaven and the earth. But now it is absolutely perfect. Most of the mountain worships, those group of genealogical monks who still knows this, even if they know a few will take it seriously. Even if anyone wants to take it seriously, the day of the Tao is thinner than the mountain, and the pedestrians in the afterglow, what can they do? So you said before that the humane method should be used to sew up the mountains and rivers for Tongyi's Hao. Qin Pingan replaced by you, will it be ridiculous to look back at the words at the time now? As a result, the other party came directly. The so-called Taoist ancestors' so-called distinction between heaven and man is different from the Confucian purpose. Which one do you think is ridiculous, or are both very funny? Qing Tong's scalp was numb and choked for a while. Your uncle, can this involve Tao ancestor and most holy master? Qing Tong almost got up without being frightened, first imitated the Confucian scholars and then went to the sect. The atmosphere became more awkward for a while. Qing Tong finally remembered something and put away all the Dao Yun in the town demon tower. Xiaomo is no different. But Qin Pingan gradually recovered his original appearance in a green shirt. Qing Tong said, "It is a mistake to give birth to people from heaven and earth. As for those saints who go their own way, as Lu Zhangjiao said, saints do not die, there are more thieves." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Come back. Isn't your Qing Tong good at a handful of big amulets? Fulu is so big, why don't you just put the label of the old heavenly coordinator on me? Call the patriarch of the three teachings to come and take a look?" After that, Qin Pingan pointed his finger at the white jug talisman, and signaled the other party to cherish the time. Qing Tong had a somewhat sad expression. Qin Pingan saw Qing Tong's posture, and he thought of human nature without a reason for wandering thousands of miles away, as well as the yin and yang gods of the Qi trainers, which is not considered to be a kind of heavenly-leaning day month highlight? Not to mention the Yang Mu Mao who was killed by Yang Ning the young man, but the old man Liang Shuangxi's spirit out of his body to travel far away, as well as the current state of Xiaomo in front of him, and of course the student Cui Dongshan. The difference is a little bit, and the loss is 1,000 miles. The difference of the Taoist heart will bring about the deviation of the personality. The only exception is probably Zheng Juzhong. With a stroke of Qing Tong's 2 fingers, the phoenix tree leaf disappeared in a flash, then fell back to the many fallen leaves, and then pushed the second leaf to Qin Pingan. Qing Tong asked curiously, "In the guest house beside Handan Road, why don't you determine the authenticity of Na Lu Yen?" Before in the first picture scroll, Qin Pingan left Xiaomo and headed for the road alone. Without hesitation he overturned the bookcase and the book was blank. The thing of drawing a dipper according to the gourd can be done very simply. Just ask that Xiaoma to hand a sword to the old guest house, and you will know the truth. Qin Pingan said, "Treat the seniors and sages on the road of spiritual practice, we juniors under the big trees who are good to enjoy the cool, walking on the sturdy and flattened Xuanhuan Avenue that they have opened up and stepped on. Of course, we must sincerely respect a little, let alone juniors." The long-awaited Lu Zhu. Qing Tong looked awkward. Qin Pingan said, "Of course I meet some people who are disrespectful to the old, especially those who like to rely on the old to sell the old. They are polite, meaning that when the courtesy is reached you don't have to be too polite. Can't be a meal. Seniors think so?" Xiaomo smiled and said, "At this time fellow Taoists should answer I think it's true." The young hidden official sighed immediately, and the ending sounded upward, "How can I speak to the young fellow who is a fellow Taoist and an old friend?" Xiaomo nodded and said, "Pay attention next time." Qing Tong didn't want to have anything next time and immediately changed the subject. "After you leave here when the sect celebration is over, you might as well go straight to Huangliang country where Lu Zhu's hometown is. Directly at Jindan." Seeing that Qin Pingan didn't seem to be interested, Qing Tong continued to persuade him kindly, "This matter is not compelling. Since Lu Yen has set it straight, then you are already one of the destined people and Tianyu will not take the blame." Speaking of this, Qing Tong felt very awkward, so he had to stop the conversation and change his statement. Yushindu Mountain is a Kendo sect. If you can get this opportunity, plus you have to bury the river and pray for rain. The Taoist formula, I believe that in the next 200 to 300 years, The number of immortals in Luapa Mountain and Shindu Mountain may be said to be the scene of springing up after the rain. Quantity or color will not differ too much. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Duckweed gathers and scatters and everything goes with the fate." Afterwards Qin Pingan added, "When the dream wakes up, the yellow beam is not ripe. It is true or false, whether it is good or bad, and it is inaccurate. Just like at this moment, how can you be sure that you are not still in Zozi? In the fantasy world created for you?" Qing Tong smiled, obviously thinking that this kind of nonsense should be left to those who worry about the sky to disturb themselves. Qin Pingan wiped the golden fallen leaf casually, and also returned it to the distant fallen leaves. The next two leaves are a few hints. For example, putting the leaves together before and after is actually a page of the old almanac. Drought and flooding. The war between water and fire that caused the chaos of the sky and the earth in the ancient times has caused many deaths and injuries in the world. In addition, the monster army in the wild world swept across a continent of mountains and rivers. No matter what the reason, you Qin Pingan came too late, you are doomed to be too late to save you life and death. At most, it is to learn from the official who prays for rain, and remedy it afterwards, and it may not be able to succeed. And Qing Tong has another digression, because it is precisely this rainfall that is the cause of the land of a county, flooded with years of age, and sinking into the water. The heavens collapsed because you, this one, stood on the sidelines. Don't you think of coming to clean up the mess that you caused by your own hands? Could it be that when Hai carefully climbed to the sky and left, and the Sanjiao Patriarch Sandao is all in your calculations? All these causal cycles, tens of thousands of years apart, were actually counted by Zhou Zi early by sufficient words. Are you sure? Otherwise, couldn't you stop the original fire and water dispute? Even if he couldn't stop him, why didn't he even stop one or two shots but didn't show up from start to finish? This is Qing Tong's merciless ridicule. As for the official who prayed for rain during the severe drought, he was holding the letter of praying for rain from Qin Pingan. The beginning of the article was, "Rain Master Feng Bo, Lei Jun Electric Mother, listen to my edict, and those who violate the order will be cut." In fact, when Qing Tong saw this scene from a distance at that time, to be honest, at that moment Qing Tong was more than a tremor of Taoism, and he was almost frightened. Think of that one, but the supreme existence of the supreme high school in those long years before that 10,000 years. It's just that no human being, or perhaps any god, knows what this existence is thinking. Maybe the Taoist ancestor who is the closest to a certain truth? Qin Pingan looked down at the pictures in the two fallen leaves and suddenly smiled. Senior Qing Tong seems to be very good at teasing others. Qing Tong frowned and said, "What do you say?" Earlier in one of the paintings, Qin Pingan was the county guard in charge of water management. Born in the Han nationality at a young age, titled on the gold list, and yet to marry a wife. Without exception, they all fit Qin Pingan's resume and situation. Born in a low alley, he eventually took up a high position and became the last hidden official. "I had to go around for alms, just like those 54 intercontinental ferry boats hanging upside down the Mountain Spring Banner Studio." Although Yunnan Yao is a well-known Taoist couple, he has not yet officially married his wife, and so on. They are not completely similar, but as long as they are carefully explored, they have everything in common. In addition, Qin Pingan met the literati who was idle at home, and he said that the Imperial Examination System art article was well done, and then doing other things would be a lash and a slap in the blood, otherwise it would be some wild foxes and meditations. The evil spirit outside. Everyone is inferior, only high in reading. Why do you study, and are you an official? Seal your wife Inzi? There are so many techniques on the mountain, only swordsmanship is the only one, like reading in the world, looking at the world and despising others. Isn't Qing Tong taking the opportunity to ridicule the sword repairman who relies on one sword to break the 10,000 laws, and has no more ideas? There is innuendo everywhere, and there are other points. For example, the High Gate Mansion symbolizes the once Great Wall of Jianxi. And Ning Yao of the Great Wall of Sword Qi is the woman who unfortunately is not a man, so the son-in-law who entered the Zhu's mansion is right and talented, of course because of this person's identity and the lineage of Wensheng. The closed disciple of Cui Yang and the younger disciple who controlled them, so the boss Jianxian is quite valued by this person, and the phrase, "unwilling to pursue a career," implied that Qin Pingan was not a sword repairer at the time. Qing Tong has a guilty conscience. What's the matter? This can also guess your own thoughts and intentions. This time it was Xiao Morris' turn again. It's not a woman who is thinking about needles in the sea, or I am a scholar of my generation. Qin Pingan glanced at Qing Tong, who was on the opposite side. Is he actually a woman right now? As for the last scene, the county guard pushed in the door and picked out one of the oil lamps on the table. Probably it was Qing Tong who had a lot of resentment towards Jianxiu, and he was still whispering about the boss Jianxian and himself. Is it that the boss of the Sword Fairy Evening Festival is not guaranteed, so he can only give to a foreigner who has been to the Great Wall of Sword Qi on his deathbed a few days ago? In the end, the old man lying on the sickbed who said nothing was like that Qin Qingdu who was unable to beat a sword on the battlefield. In the end, only half of the Great Wall of Sword Qi can be left? Qin Pingan squeezed his sleeves with both hands and said with a smile, "You are not scolding me, but here you are scolding an old sword fairy who has passed away. I'm not angry. How can I be angry? I can't commit it. It's unnecessary." Just like in the Great Wall of Sword Qi, any living sword repairman in the lower 5 realms can ridicule Xuanhuan as being inferior to himself. By the way, Senior Qing Tong, you didn't scold me, did you? Qing Tong remained silent, did not admit or refute. Xiao Mo felt that this guy should have listened to his son's persuasion before, and let him go back to Shindu Mountain. Let Qing Tong breathe a sigh of relief, because Qin Pingan had already actively pushed away the 2 fallen leaves and replaced it with the next picture. Qin Pingan asked, "Is it a kind reminder? Is it still Zhou's arrangement or is it your own intention?" Qing Tong gave an ambiguous statement and said softly, "It doesn't matter who means the general trend." Qin Pingan sneered, "Don't you understand? This is Zhou's reminder to you." On the screen, it is the overlord who is the warlord, a half-strike about whether it is benevolence and righteousness. After Qing Tong realized, Dao's heart was shaken. Qing Tong originally thought that this fallen leaf meant that once the patriarch of the 3 religions went out of the way, it would be a brand new pattern that has not existed in 10,000 years. There will definitely be great cultivators in the Ascending Realm and the 14th Realm who will make the kind of blocking the way to stop the river, or even cross the river and demolish the bridge, and kill all the cultivators who might fight with them on their own avenues. Just thinking about Qin Pingan's Feijin transmission of letters again, Qing Tong couldn't help but feel cold in his back. Qin Pingan sneered, "Could it be that when you deal with Zhou Zi you just lie on the ground and pretend to be dead, resigning to fate?" In the next picture scroll, there is a pair of lingering and afflicted talents and beautiful women. Probably the same people in the world will live long, the same lovers will eventually become married, but they are walking on different ways of thinking. In fact, in a county where Qin Pingan is the water of the water, running around for alms or making private visits, it can be regarded as experiencing the suffering of the people. I once saw a poor old scholar walking home at dusk, passing by the street. Seeing a cooked food case set up, the old man walked a long way out, repeatedly talking about "No good, I am a scholar, how can I go shopping in person?" When I walked to the door of the house I was really greedy. I looked at the sky and when it got dark I couldn't recognize people. Just think again, the moon is bright and recognizes people again. It's better to wait for the twilight moon to rise again. At that time it was still darker. Finally, the old scholar went to the house to pick up a basket and walked out quickly. In the cooked food case he didn't dare to dispute the price. It's getting dark. I have also seen a man who accidentally lost his wages, sitting on the side of the street some distance from his home, and slapped himself hard. Not far away there was another group of young and old gamblers gambling there, making money that could not be kept through the house like running water, shouting loudly and slapped in the face. After that, the old monk was in the main hall and chopped the Buddha statue to make firewood for heating. Called the Enlightened Wild Fox Meditation, the literary barriers of scholars studying Buddhist scriptures, those who beat Puraria Lobata, and those mad meditations that swear at the Buddha at every turn. However, Qin Pingan knows that, in addition to the fact that he met Lu Zu's pillow and the civil servant praying for rain and governing water, all these are Zhou exploring his own Taoist inclinations, or to be precise, it is the importance of the purpose of the 3 religions in my heart. Zhou's deepest intentions were that she met the old woman on the road after the rain. The old woman was in ragged clothes, but riding a horse with gorgeous saddles and bridles. If it is only understood that the ghosts still have their relatives in the Yangjian to pay homage to the grave during the Zhongyuan festival, then how should those who have been displaced in the Yangjian deal with themselves? The world is sad in autumn, the grass and trees are sad, the offerings are displayed, the wine commemorates, there is this fierce year, the displacement, the sacrifice is not coming, the soul is helpless. Of course it is okay to think about it, but Zhou's intention is definitely more than this level, and it is through the old woman to explain the current situation of the remnants of the ancient gods and their real intentions. It is also the phrase, "Where does the young man go?" and the following phrase, "The road is sloppy, take a rest for a while and leave early the next day." Because of the next picture, Qin Pinyin and Xiaomo have become gods of the same place. Calmly climb high and restore God's position. But in Qin Pingan's mind, Zhou Zi's most precarious intention is the last picture, the scene that is both strange and familiar. It may be because all the sorrows and joys in the world are only from empathy. Qin Pingan looked around but didn't notice the slightest strangeness. I believe that even if I offer a caged bird and completely cover this parasol world, I will still get nothing. It seems that knowing more will only bring more unknowns. In fact, many times I would envy the monk Qing Tong, so I just went to the ground thinking nothing about it. What kind of love is it? Is it windy and rainy, or the sun is shining and love will not come? Qin Pingan took out the sword-raising gourd from his sleeve, took a sip of his drink, looked up at Qing Tong and said, "Go ahead, the real reason." Qing Tong had a weird face and said in his heart, "You already know the similarity between me and Lu Tai?" Qin Pingan nodded. Qing Tong no longer smiled sincerely and no longer spoke in his heart. His voice was cold and cold. "One, I believe in Zhou Zi's guess, another, I believe in my own eyes. Just fighting often, I want to see more. In fact, the more I look at it, the more confused it becomes, but it's not as bad as not to look at it." Qing Tong raised his hands and patted his knees lightly, his expression relaxed. "Maybe it's all blindfolded, but what does it matter? That's it." The implication is that a young fellow believes that the future Qin Pingan that Zhou Zi guessed will definitely come, but another young fellow chooses to believe that the former Qin Pingan will always be the former teenager. Qin Pingan nodded, expressing understanding. Putting away the sword gourd, Qin Pingan stood up and said with a smile, "Senior Yuanxiang, the reason why he would engrave on the sycamore tree is because the senior felt that there were actually two long trips in his life. One was for a Taoist man. Death, and death once was completely forgotten by the world, so Senior Yuanxiang would engrave everywhere, because he hopes that in the next 1,000 years, all future generations will know about the world. There was once a sword repairman named Yuanxiang who existed in the world." Qing Tong got up and asked, "Is it the file record from the summer residence?" Qin Pingan smiled and shook his head. "I guessed it." When Qin Pingan was about to leave, Qing Tong suddenly said, "Please sit down." Qin Pingan was stunned. "Why did you change your mind?" Qing Tong smiled and said, "In fact, there is no reason, it is just a gamble. Either you lose money to your grandma's house or you can make a lot of money." Qin Pingan asked, "Don't regret it?" Qing Tong smiled and said, "It's not too late to regret it when you regret it." Qin Pingan took his seat again and said, "Xiaomo, help protect us." Xiaomo smiled and nodded and glanced at Qing Tong sideways. Qing Tong seems to be indifferent, but in fact it is a little bit narrow, as if to say, "Xiaomo Dao, you be polite to me in the future." On this day's New Year's Eve, the world's phoenix tree leaves fell in abundance. At the same time, there are man-made dreams, a heavenly journey. I invite all monarchs to dream. Borrow a stick of incense from Junhongju town has always been a pattern of vertical streets and horizontal alleys. Between Guanshui Street and Guanshan Street, there is an unnamed alley. There is a small bookshop without plaques. The business is deserted all year round, but the prices of books are strange. High, do not reduce the price, do not open for a year to open for 3 years. The young shopkeeper, Li Jin, the of water in the Chongtan River, was lying on a wicker chair, carrying a hand stove and taking a nap. For some early New Year's Eve dinners, there have been bursts of firecrackers. In the eyes of outsiders, being an official is nothing more than a good official or bad official. For those in official circles, it is also simple. Do you want to climb up? Secular public gates are no different from Shanshui officialdom, so Li Jin, the water of the Chongtan River, obviously does not want to climb up. Just talk about the 3 heavy golden rains in the past few years. The monarch Wei Shan in Beiwepian Mountain has benefited the most. The key is that he is within his jurisdiction. In the eyes of the gods of mountains and rivers, Mr. Wei Dashan is called a deduction searcher. Even the mountain of the prince in the Beiwe boundary was not covered with rain and dew. Li Jin narrowed his eyes, his heartstrings tense, but quickly got up with a smile. "Qin Shanju, good supernatural powers." After hearing the request of the uninvited guest, Li Jin wondered, "Similar to the Wanmin umbrella?" Qin Pingan laughed dumbly when he heard this metaphor and thought for a while, "I can barely say that." Li Jin pondered for a moment and said, "I don't need your share of merit, but I have something to ask for, which is regarded as an exchange." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "The business remains the same, but if Li Shui asks for something, as long as I can do it, I will definitely not refuse." Li Jin said tentatively, "When the owner of the mountain returns to Luapa Mountain next time, can there be Lord Lao coloring a white drawing scroll?" Qin Pingan asked with a smile, But when Zhu Lian and Pei Xiang returned from Qingfeng City and passed by your place, one of the two scrolls presented to Brother Li. Li Jin nodded and said, "Exactly." Qin Pingan knew it well, knowing that Zhu Lian passed by the shop last time and gave Li Jin two paintings, both of which were white-line drawings. The first painting was a carp painting, Li Jin's appearance and riding a big carp. Only the head and tail are exposed, and the carp's body is hidden in the sea of clouds. On this scroll, Zhu Lian uses the seal of Xuanhuan to engrave the 8 characters. My heart is deep and secluded, and I am in the realm of Ming Dynasty. As for the other picture scroll, it was the scribe in front, as if he had already jumped over the Dragon Gate, overlooking the rapids above the Dragon Gate, because the scribe in the picture scroll supported the Dragon Gate pillar with one hand. Zhu Lian seals the 8 characters with white letters. Yulong is in disguised form, superbly transformed. Just because it is 2 white-drawn scrolls, Li Jin's request, the so-called coloring, is like a kind of temple Taoist temple as a deity, depicting gold. The canonization of the gods of mountains and rivers, of course, can only be the emperor's will of the local court, or the sages of the Confucian temple can mouth the constitution. But in addition to the second-class description of gold, some monks with consummate merit or some great monks with sufficient realm, do have a certain effect. Qin Pingan nodded and said, "You don't need to next time, you can do this today." Li Jin said helplessly, "In this dreamland, my 2 paintings are all imaginary things." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Li Shuaishan just contemplates and you will know after a try." Li Jin contemplated that picture scroll. Of course it was the picture of a carp rising to the sky. As for the carp jumping into the Dragon Gate, I dare not think about it for the time being. When Qin Ping's wrist twisted, he turned out to be the little snow cone that was given to Gentleman Zhong Kue back then. He took the picture and spread it out in the air, carefully painting the carp with gold and finally finishing the eye. Li Jin was surprised. What kind of visualization? Can it be turned into reality? Am I dreaming? Yes, I was dreaming. So after waking up from a dream, it's always going to be empty baskets, right? Qin Pingan would definitely not make jokes about this kind of thing. Qin Pingan suddenly said, "Since all of them are here, then good things will come in pairs." Li Jin hesitated. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "It's a matter of raising your hand." For the scribe on the second scroll, the robe on his body is depicted in gold. After that, Qin Pingan took out the name stamps of the 2 parties, Luopashan Qin Pingan and Qin Shi. The upper and lower inscriptions are in Yin, and Zhu and Bai are used together, which means Lianzhu. Because of the particularity of the number of seals and the ancient singular number, because there is the intention of use 1 instead of 2, use 3 instead of 4, and take an odd number to help the sun. So in the end, Qin Pingan took out another seal, which was the watermark that had been with him for many years. Li Jin put away the 2 paintings, made a bow with Qin Pingan, and thanked him from the bottom of his heart. He stood up and said in a deep voice, "Later the incense sticks will definitely be sincere. The rivers of the Danjiang River are righteous, and Li Jin is willing to do the best for the landscape of Tonggishao." Meager power. Dressed in a green shirt, disappeared. Li Jin opened his eyes and quickly took out 2 scrolls from the square. Sure enough, gold has been described. Water transport is abundant, beyond imagination. Li Jin immediately returned to the Chongtan River water mansion with the wind, and solemnly took a bath and changed his clothes. Finally he took a deep breath, facing the south, twisting his hands like incense, condensing part of the water transport under his jurisdiction, and finally lit a scent of water. At the same time, near the Chongdan River, a river righteous with a green snake entwining his arm is the same. And a certain water empress, even more so, is extremely sincere, and does not lose the first 2 colleagues at all. The lotus root blessed land in the Luapa mountain, under the water dragon, led the rivers and water gods in the blessed land, and each lit a stick of fragrance. North Juluzhou Jidu. In a magnificent new home mansion, a black-clothed teenager with golden eyes sat cross-legged on the main seat in the lobby, smiling and looking at the Xianxia Shuizheng who came as a guest. Situ stirred, "Tell me, is it considered poor and no one asks in the downtown area, rich in the mountains with distant relatives?" The former colleague and the subordinate now had a smile on his face that was a bit embarrassing to hide. Li Yuan just chuckled, but he was not afraid of the other side's grudges. The 2 sides knew the bottom line. Having been neighbors for countless years, the other side was unprofitable and unprofitable. As long as the money is in place, everything is easy to talk about. Both parties are from Shuizheng and have been brothers and sisters for many years. In the previous years there were only 2 temples left in the 3 temples of Jidu, and the upper temple was located in the Chongxian department of the Deyuan dynasty. The central temple where Li Yuan is in charge is in the Water Dragon sect, but it has only been refined into a patriarch hall. In the Longgong Cave, Fushui Island, which used to be the Taoist temple of Li Yuan in the past, also helped to build a bridge and helped Qin Pingan to buy it at a very low price. In comparison, before he was promoted to Dadu Longtinghao, the guy named Situ Jidong in front of him was even more generous. In the past so many years, I haven't seen this guy come to Longgong Dong Tian to ask for a polite greeting. He is very arrogant and has a backing. This time is different from the past. Situ Ji ran up to get close to himself every 3.5 times. Situ Jidong, as Jidu Shangxi Shuijing, used to be the appearance of an old man, but now he is not rejuvenated, but he is also radiant. Because the former Confucian temple has always deliberately ignored the issue of data's canonization. As the existence of incense in Dadu temple for thousands of years, it has always been in a self-defeating and pitiful situation, with a long history of ancient official positions. Like a poor officialdom who couldn't receive his salary at all, he was even more pitiful than the Qingshui Yamen of the dynasty under the mountain. The emperors and monarchs of the various countries along the Dadu, the large and small imperial courts, are unable to help, and there were no dragon kings in the world before. Of course, the distant waters cannot save the nearby fires. Every time a golden body appears cracks, it is almost irreversible and there is no retreat. Whenever a golden body collapses, there will be one less Shuijing in the world. In the heyday of the past years, large and small drove through the sea and dud the water. More than 200 water was right and there was no one in 10. But since Aquarius created a great blasphemy with manpower, it was tantamount to a precedent, and the Confucian temple finally took action. Some Dadu Shuijing, even if they have not been able to be directly promoted to Dadu Lord like Li Yuan, but even if it is Situ Agitation who maintains the same status as Shuijing, it is only because the Confucian temple's canonization is equal to the awe-inspiring Dadu orthodoxy. Once again acknowledging Shuang's line, this time they blasphemed the old officials. It is not the dead wood in spring. Li Yuan didn't continue to ridicule Situ Jidong, and started talking about business. After talking about business matters, Li Yuan personally sent the guests to the gate. Firstly, it was courtesy. Secondly, every time he looked up at the golden plaque of Longting Hofu at his gate, he felt happy in his heart. These Shuijing names and surnames are not taboo. Even the surnames next to the fire character will not hinder the main road. But the name must be next to the word water, which is a fixed rule since ancient times. For example, Li Yuan's source and situs, agitated. But the words thirsty and sand are definitely not good. As for the Manchu characters are slightly larger, the Bei characters are too small, and the flood is too bad. So if you need to change the name, then the words such as rising, turbulent, and warm are all good choices. Li Yuan had always felt that Situ Ji was better than himself. It must be because of the dominant name. Now it seems he average. Swaggering back to the mansion, really unwilling to go to the government office to find the guilt, so he used the water technique to go to Dedushui, and quickly escaped for thousands of miles, and finally quietly went to the Dragon Palace cave sky. Li Yuan finally sitting on the sea of clouds, overlooking the islands and the lake, green snails and the jasper plate. After watching for a long time, I couldn't see a flower. Li Yuan yawned, fell back and lay down on the sea of clouds. Anyway, there was nothing to do. No, I'm busy, uncle, so I'll take a nap. The black-clothed boy slowly opened a pair of golden eyes and said with a sneer, "Who is a thief so brave, how dare?" Halfway through, Li Yuan jumped up and said, "Qin Pingan?" Wearing a long green shirt, smiled kindly and said, "If you have anything, please help." Li Yuan raised his hands and patted his cheek hard, crisp and sweet. "Say. It is also necessary to help a swollen face to fill a fat man. Do I need to ask anything? I can't. First nod and agree to be a brother." Li Yuan finally waved his hand. "What merits do you want? If you see it outside, see it outside." Qin Pingan shook his head and insisted, "The rules are no exceptions, just come back to you for a drink." Li Yuan hesitated for a moment, nodded and asked sternly, "I want to see Shen Lin next?" Qin Pingan smiled and nodded, "I have seen Duke Ling Yuan, and I have to continue on my way." Li Yuan asked in a low voice, "A lot of places to go?" Qin Pingan still nodded, "A lot." After that, Qin Pingan continued to dream far away. In the demon building of a certain town, a tall old master stood leaning on a railing, looking at the sycamore tree not far away. Next to him is a middle-aged Taoist priest holding a purple bamboo stick, a large gourd wine scoop hanging from his waist, a yellow shirt and hemp shoes and a sword on his back. In fact, the old master and this middle-aged Taoist priest, if they are both predecessors at this moment, they are looking at the current future. The Taoist priest smiled and asked, "What happened to you when you traveled out?" The old master laughed at himself. "It's not very good, it's not very good. The village boy deceived me to be too weak." The old master looked for a moment and said, "Friend Xuanyang, do you help me with the calculations?" The Taoist nodded with a smile. "The most sacred master has spoken, how dare Lu Yen refuse to follow it?" The old master joked, "What Lu Yen is the long-awaited Lu Zhu." Lu Yen couldn't laugh or cry. He pinched his fingers and said with a solemn expression, "Popular on the ground, watch." The old master gave a hum. It was the fifth line of the Guanghua, nodded, waved his sleeve casually and said, "Take it again." The line that Lu Yen calculated earlier was that the day and the earth are moving, the yin and the sun are waning, and the avenue is declining and everything is difficult to move. Or to be precise, everything is changing and we should wait and see the situation. Gentlemen should stay quiet and not move, and watch the wind from the wall for the time being. After a while, Lu Yen continued, "The 9th 5-year plan, watch my life, the gentleman has no guilt." The old master smiled and said, "That's very good. God helps those who help themselves." Lu Yen hesitated to say something and stopped. "Forget it, you are the most sacred master in the vast world, of course you have the final say." After holding his hands together, the old master smiled and said, "Don't think that I did something, how could it be possible?" The most sacred master was amazed suddenly and said, "Yeah, I suddenly felt that Yuan Bushan Tian was walking alone in the moonlight tonight." Lu Yen smiled and nodded. The old master sighed with emotion for no reason. The most sacred master of the vast world mentioned a few names, among them Yuku is the name of Li Sheng. The name of Ko is the real name of the head teacher by Yujing. The following sentence. I really don't know how many people in the world have established religions and claim to be their ancestors, and how many people claim to be invincible. The previous sentence. If there is no Qin Xingdu Yuku Ko Ming Qin Pingon. You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.